We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and somehow Palpatine returned.
You had to? You had to.
I had to. What is that not the most iconic line of this film? For better or worse, #Positivity Podcast. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Disney month, and this week we are talking about Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Wren. Are you ready for this one, Andrew?
I am.
You changed your name because you're a bad guy? I don't know. It's hard to come up with a Star Wars name.
I don't know. You're the one that did it, so.
I'll workshop it. I'll edit something else in when I think of something more clever. But, Andrew, we have a big episode ahead of us. We're talking about Disney movies all month long, which that in and of itself is a big deal. Disney's a pretty big studio. They make a lot of movies, Andrew. But Star Wars, something that, as we all know, didn't start with Disney, but Disney took over control and has made a lot of Star Wars content. I think from a running time standpoint, as far as TV and movies, there's more Disney Star Wars than any other Star Wars combined. What do you think? That's got to be the case by now, right?
I mean, you include the shows, absolutely, because, I mean, all that really existed before, I mean, you had the 6 movies, couple of weird spin-offs, and obviously the Clone Wars television show, but
Clone
we gotta be getting
Wars,
close.
Rebels, yeah, I think if it's not there yet, it's about to be the tipping point. So,
Yeah.
Star Wars is a huge part of the Disney brand at this point. And the movies, and let's not get into all the extended universe stuff just yet, but the movies, the Star Wars Disney trilogy has an interesting reception. And we are going to talk about it, but specifically we're going to be dialing into the end of that trilogy, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, but it's impossible to talk about just this one film. It just is. The fact that it's a sequel to the previous 2 and really a sequel to all the movies that came before it. I mean, there's so much tied into the reception of this movie and the production that we've got to really cover our bases. So, Andrew, normally at this point, I just ask you, what's your history with this movie? Did you see it in theaters? But I think we got to go a little broader than that to provide some context. So let's talk about history with Star Wars, like up until this film coming out. I think speaking of the original trilogy, I think I've told my little story here before, but we had the box set in my house. My dad had the box set of the original trilogy on VHS. It had Darth Vader's helmet like on the sleeve. It looked really rad. And growing up, I knew about Star Wars. I knew I Am Your Father. I knew the references. I had a lot of the toys, but I had never seen the films. And I took it upon myself in 2nd grade. I remember like the house we lived in at the time. I was like, I'm going to watch these movies. It was almost like homework. Like I need to know the context. And so over the course of 3 nights, I watched one movie before I went to bed. And I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't like fall in love with Star Wars or anything. I liked them and I was like, okay, I understand. I know all the references. I get it. And that was my introduction to Star Wars. Like I said, the toys were truly my introduction. I had a really cool Millennium Falcon that like folded open. I had Luke's what's the thing called? The speeder, that floaty thing that he drives. I had various toys, so I guess technically that's my introduction. But as far as like the stories, the movies, I watched that original trilogy sometime in the early 90s, and that was my introduction. How about you, Andrew? Did you start with the OGs or start with the prequels? What crossed your eyeballs first?
It was probably definitely the originals. Like we had a couple of the different box sets. We had when they first got on VHS, like it had like the old like classic artwork with like Luke holding the lightsaber up, looking all like He-Man, even though Luke Skywalker doesn't look like that. And then when the special editions came out, I know we rebought them then. And so I did see the special editions in theaters when they came out. So when 4, 5, and 6 got remastered by George Lucas, much to the, crying out of the entire Star Wars fan base, I saw all 3 of those in theaters. So those were in my brain. And then the prequels came, and man, I saw those a lot. I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but like I saw episode 1 like 5 or 6 times in theaters. Like I went back a lot. Second 2, I imagine not nearly as much, but yeah, I was in big. So didn't exactly have a lot of Star Wars toys when I was a kid. I had a couple of lightsabers, things like that, but I don't know. I feel like I'd kind of moved out of action figures by that point, especially when the prequels hit. I was kind of, I don't know. I guess I was more into comics at that point, but yeah, either way though, still a heavy presence in my house. My mom loves Star Wars. She has Star Wars stuff everywhere. My dad's always been a big fan of those original films. Used to have the vinyl EPs of the or LPs of the soundtracks. He had all sorts of stuff. So always been a big Star Wars family. And then even when Force Awakens came out, my whole family went and saw it at Alamo Drafthouse back when it was out at the off Mason Road there. So up until Force Awakens, and then I had to move away and ruin it all. But until then, man, big family, big Star Wars family.
I know the VHSs I watched were not the special editions. I know that. But they were certainly tampered with, and I don't know enough about the history of these revisions to tell you like what level exactly I watched. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is it's not like we had those original 3 movies untouched until the special editions. George Lucas was almost constantly going back and tweaking things. Most notably, Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, was originally released in theaters simply as Star Wars. The opening crawl just said Star Wars. And that's probably the earliest thing he changed, because I believe like by the time The Empire Strikes Back comes out, Star Wars, the first one, had re-released in theaters with the change to the title. But if you talk to anybody who was a kid at that time or saw the movie in theaters at that time, like a lot of them still to this day just call A New Hope Star Wars. Like when they say Star Wars, they're talking about that movie specifically. It always drove me crazy because I always knew it as A New Hope. I'm like, it's episode 4, guys. You can't just because it's the first one you saw, but like kind of knowing the history and context, it makes sense. It gets baked in your brain as one thing, and then when it changes, you've still got, that name. In fact, that box set that I've been talking about drove me nuts. This is how long I've been obsessed with dumb stuff like this. The 3 covers to the movies, episode 4 said Star Wars really big, and then in small text said episode 4 A New Hope, whereas the other 2 said Empire Strikes Back real big, and Star Wars was the part that was in small font. And the inconsistency drove me nuts. It still does, to be honest with you.
Even though it's technically correct.
I mean, it's the correct title, but like visually, episode 5 and 6 put the subtitle as, it's The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars real small. But episode 4 put Star Wars real big and A New Hope real small. Like it's doing the same thing, just emphasizing Star Wars on episode 4.
But you understand that when episode 4 was released in theaters, it was just called Star Wars.
Yeah, I just explained that, Andrew. I went over that. I just said that to the microphone.
So even though I understand that, but you seem to not be understanding.
By the time you're packaging them as episode 4, 5, and 6, by the time you're like recognizing this is the middle part of a story or whatever, you need some consistent. Well, look, it visually from it,
because I know people who get genuinely annoyed at the retroactive relabeling of it, because people get annoyed by everything.
Yeah,
because it was Star Wars when they saw it. It's the same way, because you're not an Indiana Jones guy, so you probably don't care at all. Indiana Jones has the exact same problem. When Indiana Jones, the first one's released, it's not called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then it's Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, blah, 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 blah. But down the line, at some point, they switched it and started calling it Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And again, I know perfectionists slash originalists, whatever you want to call them. Perfectionist sounds mean, but like there are people who are like, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not Indiana Jones with the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I don't know. I just don't care enough to get involved. But
it's easy for me to say that but if this
we've
happened,
never known it is not episode 4 though. Like,
exactly.
We've always seen
and
it,
I would
so
probably be on the other side. Like if I knew it as one thing and it changed, I would probably be the stubborn person that's always correcting people. So I can't pass too much judgment. It reminds me a bit of First Blood comes out to big hit.
Yep.
But the series continues to revolve around Rambo. So part 2 is called Rambo First Blood Part 3, and then Part 3 is called Rambo 3. Like,
right.
They never changed the title. They never retroactively called the first one First Blood Rambo or whatever. But the name certainly evolves over time in a very strange way. Okay, so that's where I'm at with the OGs. The prequels come out. I remember seeing the poster for episode 1 for the first time in movie theaters. Little Anakin and his shadow is of Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
Really cool visual. I was excited for it. This was going to be like my Star Wars. I could finally see it in theaters. I was on board. I saw episode 1 when what was that, 99? I was a youngin'. I was 9-10 years old. I liked it okay. Pod racing was cool. The pod racing video game was very cool. That's the lasting legacy of that movie for me. I think I saw episode 2 in theaters, and like #Positivity Podcast. I'm just trying to set the stage for where I stand with Star Wars. I found it incredibly boring. That's the one that gets really into like the politics and stuff, and I just was not connecting with the movie. And I did not even go see episode 3 in theaters. I just wasn't even curious enough to go see it. I didn't see episode 3 until way, way later. I kind of did a Star Wars revisit, finally watched it. And look, I would guess one day we're going to get into the prequels on this podcast, but I still was not super Star Wars fan after this prequels. Maybe even less so because I just wasn't really taken with them.
Not uncommon. The internet response to the prequels literally led to a movie called The People versus George Lucas. So the backlash against Star Wars. It's always funny to me when people talk about how, well, nobody seems to like Star Wars. And I'm like, they've always never really liked Star Wars. There's been this, like, there's the phrase I heard once upon a time, and I want to say #Positivity Podcast, is nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. Because it just feels like every single new Star Wars thing is met with this kind of immediate kind of knee-jerk gut check. That's not what I wanted type response. Now, and that there's a whole different conversation to have there about how modern fandoms have mistaken not what I wanted for bad. There's probably a whole thesis to be written about that I will personally write, because I have that feeling more than anything that fans have really conflated the two. Because
I absolutely believe in. We're not getting into this too heavy, but I think a lot of the backlash to any Star Wars movie, especially the Disney ones, though, is when the movie doesn't do what I'm going to use this term, fantasy booked in their mind, they push back.
Right.
And I don't know. I'll leave it at that. I use the term fantasy booked, and that's what comes to mind, because I think you could also say no one hates wrestling more than wrestling fans. There's a lot of similarities with those fandoms. I think The People versus Vince McMahon would also be a very engaging documentary.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody's had the idea already. So,
I won't say this happens with all fandoms. Like, I feel like Star Wars Jesus Christ. I feel like Star Trek is maybe a little bit more kinder of a fandom.
No.
But more compared to Star Wars, there's definitely backlash, and Picard split the fan base and stuff. But you think it's just as
the more
much...
recent stuff. The more recent stuff has had its share of vitriol.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Well, I'm not gonna sit here and defend any fandom, but yeah, Star Wars just being with as big as it is, I think you just see a lot of the nasty stuff more than the others.
Well, and it's a high profile franchise, and
Yeah.
Disney acquiring it kind of immediately led to people being like, Disney's gonna Disney. And it was interesting to watch adult fans, especially, that I know didn't like the prequels kind of like, Disney's going to mess it up. And it's like, you already think it's messed up. Like you already don't like it and don't like what George Lucas did. Like it's always,
Yeah, but Andrew, now they're going to make these movies for kids.
Oh man, I can't imagine what's going to happen then. But like I always love it because you hear that about like the Disney sequel trilogy gets a lot of flack for quote unquote not having a plan. Basically, they're like, how did they not know what all three of these movies were going to be before they started? And that ignores that the original trilogy was not really made with a quote unquote plan in mind. The first movie was very much made as like a standalone type thing that if it didn't succeed, it could just be its own thing. There's even a sequel novel written to the first movie that doesn't abide for Empire Strikes Back because it was written with the idea Star Wars was standalone. So it takes the story. It's called Splinter of the Mind's Eye, if anybody's interested. It takes the story at a completely different place because that was an original thought. Now you shift that to the prequels. The prequels are a plan, a 100% born and conceived plan. George Lucas writing and directing all three movies, no question. And everybody hated them. I say everybody. These same fans, though, that cry for a plan now, don't like those movies. So all I'm saying now, folks, is that just because you have a plan doesn't mean it's a good plan. And it doesn't mean you're going to enjoy that plan. It's a very strange thing, but it's just one of those weird things where, like, you know, the original trilogy is this beloved thing that was not meticulously planned out from the beginning. The prequels were meticulously planned out, and the sequel trilogy wasn't that planned out, but also ran into some very real-life logistical issues. So you've got a variety of different circumstances, a variety of different things at play here, and I don't know, it's kind of, to me, where it's a point where it feels like those Star Wars fans haven't enjoyed anything Star Wars has done in like 40 years at this point.
I also think it gets lost that the original trilogy has a different director every time. Like George Lucas is obviously a creative force throughout the trilogy, but it's not as unified as people reach out to make it think. And I think your point about the prequels is very good. And also look at just about any trilogy out there. You've always got creative teams changing. I mean, I think the new Planet of the Apes is a good example. You've got creative forces changing behind the scenes with every movie, whether it's director or writer, but that's not one unified plan. And people still really like that series. The Matrix is the same creative force through all three movies, and a lot of people don't like that. I mean, of course I do. I think it's a great franchise and very consistent. But my point is, like, it's never been a case where having a plan and a unified creative team guarantees success, and changing creative forces does not. That's just never been the case. So I think I will agree with you. I think that's not the best kind of criticism to throw at this or point to as the reason for this particular fan not liking the series. All right, let's get back on track a little bit here. We're talking about our history with Star Wars. The Force Awakens. Okay, Disney's first foray into Star Wars. That trailer comes out. Finn front and center. We see these new characters. We got Harrison Ford delivering that epic line in the trailers. I wouldn't say like I'm hyped because, as I've established, I wasn't a super Star Wars guy, but I was like, I will definitely see this. Like this let's see what they're gonna do. It felt more like quote unquote classic Star Wars. Again, I wasn't really a prequel guy. And I saw that in theaters twice. I saw it like opening weekend just to check it out. I really enjoyed it. My family always goes to the movies on Christmas Day. So we all saw Star Wars again, and I was happy to see it a second time. It was probably up until that point the most I have been into Star Wars. And I always feel like I've got to clarify this point here. I am a Star Wars fan. I like most of the movies. I like the world. I do not watch every single Disney Plus series. There's too many of them. I've seen a couple seasons of The Mandalorian. I've seen it here and there. But in general, I like this world and these movies. But I think there's like this, like whenever you describe yourself as a Star Wars fan, people always assume you have like a lightsaber and robe in your closet. Like, you know, they always assume like there's this, and that is a big part of the fandom. But I don't connect with the movies on that level. It's one reason that I've never gotten to Lord of the Rings. Not a fan of Game of Thrones. These franchises
You just hate popular fantasy franchises. I get it.
No. It's Harry Potter. I'm not a Harry Potter guy, but I think a lot of the fans love that.
You're not helping. Hang
on. I know. I'm not even saying these movies are bad. I'm just saying I don't connect with them, and I think it's because a lot of the fandom connects in a way where they love the world. They love the wizarding world, and I'm not saying they all want to like cosplay and stuff, but like they're like, I want content in this world. I love the idea of wizards or Middle Earth or whatever it is, and they love that world. And I just don't think I connect with franchises in that way. You know, people love, there's that Harry Potter is a Universal, like a whole section of it is like built to be the wizarding world, and people like want to go visit and just like live in that world. And there's maybe no franchise where I feel that strongly about. I just don't connect in that way. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I like world building, and I like, you know, establishing the rules of your world and visuals and all that stuff. But like, I don't fall in love with the world in that way. I just connect with movies differently. So I think that's kind of what stops me from like entering that echelon of fan. I don't think it makes me less of a fan, but I connect to these movies in a different way, Andrew.
From a little bit of a distance.
Maybe.
But no, I get what you're saying. First off, I will say I've been to the Harry Potter world at Universal before the controversies and the diminishing returns. It's pretty cool. It's probably still pretty cool, to be fair.
I've heard good things.
I have no desire to live in that world, but visiting it for an afternoon, pretty satisfying. Yeah, it is interesting because I mean, obviously, Star Wars and even Star Trek and Harry Potter, and it kind of leads to these kind of these fandoms, the cosplay type stuff, where there's all these props, there's all this stuff. Ghostbusters runs into this too, especially with the new Ghostbusters trailer out, revealing all these tweaks to the equipment. So everybody's got to analyze it and hyper-analyze it to see.
Did you order your orange jumpsuit yet, Andrew?
No, those are red, and they're parkas.
Oh, they're red?
They're
okay,
$1,500.
Am I colorblind? You look very orange.
You might be. It's a dark trailer. It's fair. The internet blew up. All the Ghostbuster fans needed their red parkas after the Frozen
Can we
Empire
capture
trailer.
real quick your reaction? You're Ghostbusters fan number one, as far as I'm concerned. What do you think about this trailer? Are you excited? Where are you at here?
I'm liking what I'm seeing. I think I've said it before. My biggest kind of criticisms of Afterlife are that it kind of speed runs a lot of the original plot of Ghostbusters, especially as you get into that last act. And I think that's when the movie kind of almost loses me. So with this movie, it feels like we've got something. It's a new threat, new villain, fresh ideas. We got Patton Oswalt, Kumail Nanjiani, and James Acaster along for the ride, and those are all fantastic additions as far as I'm concerned. The OGs are back. I don't know what kind of part they're going to play, how big or small. Paul Rudd in a Ghostbuster suit, it feels natural, feels right. So I have a complicated relationship with the Ghostbusters fandom.
We don't need to get into that on this episode. Don't worry.
We've already done that. We've done that. But I'm liking what I'm seeing. They're saying it's kind of like a longer episode of the real Ghostbusters, taking something like a more of a more fantastical villain maybe than we've seen before, with some new ideas, and I am liking what I'm seeing. So
as someone who's not a huge Ghostbusters fan, I like a few of them. I haven't even seen Afterlife. I just want to say this. I like that this movie is clearly going to have its own aesthetic. It's going to stand apart. It's got this ice thing. It's got the Frozen logo on the poster. I think that is rad in a long-running franchise. Like the Star Wars, bring about Star Wars here, like the Disney trilogy, kind of each one has their own color palette, or like the original trilogy, you've got like the snow, you got Hoth in the second movie that differentiates that. I like having these different locations or different aesthetics or something to separate it from the rest of them. So I think that's a very cool direction to take it.
I agree completely. So, and like I said, a whole new thing. I like having a new villain. I like having a whole new kind of thing that we're facing that's not just going to be a rehash of something from before. And a lot of people even want them to reuse some of the cartoon villains. And I'm like, nah, man, like the cartoon villains are in the cartoon. Like there's nothing there's no reason to hold us back at this point. Give us something fresh, something interesting. And I'm hoping that's what we got here. So, Star Wars is a great example of that, though. Like, even you think, like, with Return of the Jedi on the forest planet, we're getting all the greens, all the earth
Yeah.
tones, much more than anything else. The Hoth stuff in Empire Strikes Back, and then you contrast that with, like, the swamp look, where it's all dark and it's dingy, and you've got the kind of grays and the blues. And A New Hope, obviously, a large chunk of that movie takes place on the desert planet, so you're getting even just the white and the beiges of that contrasted with the blue skies and the suns. And it's just cool using color to your advantage. That's actually, we mentioned a Criterion movie we both picked up, The Red Shoes. Well, neither of us have seen it, but we've heard the use of color in it is amazing. So I'm actually really looking forward to watching that, because it helps make a movie feel visual and distinct beyond just, aesthetic differences. Like, one of the biggest criticisms the MCU gets is, despite the kind of genre bending that it can do, the look and the tone of them and the palette is very similar. So it lends to the movies feeling a little samey at times. And
yeah, I've got some MCU comparisons to make in this episode. Don't worry, we will definitely.
All right, we'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, anyway.
What did you think? Force Awakens comes out. I really liked it. Like I said, it's the most I've been in Star Wars up to that point. What were your initial thoughts seeing Force Awakens? I know you saw it in theaters. How was it, Andrew?
I was pretty hyped overall. I thought the trailer was really good. I thought, the kind of retroactive stance I have on it is that, again, it was kind of J.J. Abrams being in kind of like a really weird, pseudo-impossible position of having to bring Star Wars back in a way that satisfied older fans, but still made it accessible to new fans and still brought in new things to the trilogy. So with that trailer, you got a look of all the new characters. You saw our classic characters. And I was pretty hyped going in. I saw it twice opening night. That's how dedicated I was.
Wow, look at you. I feel like the reception to that movie is about as unified as a modern Star Wars fandom can be. I know some people like it, some people hate it. I know there's different reactions out there, but I feel like the general consensus is like Abrams may have quote unquote played it safe by repeating a lot of steps from A New Hope. But like you said, I think everyone recognizes he had a Herculean task to make everyone kind of remember what they like about Star Wars and fall in love with Star Wars again and get excited about it. So even though we can all recognize like resetting the status quo to having an evil empire and a small rebellion and having a weapon that can destroy planets, this all seems very familiar. But we all were like, I get it. That's kind of it's the kind of what you had to do to get people to get back into Star Wars mode, and everyone seemed to like really be okay with that.
I agree. I think generally speaking, like you said, there were the detractors who felt maybe it was too safe, that maybe they could have done it a little bit differently, or there were George Lucas's ideas and maybe they should have used those. And the detractors in that one felt like much more of a small chunk, where the fandom generally just really liked being back in this world, liked seeing these characters back. Obviously, Harrison Ford back as Han Solo was a huge selling point for a lot of people, because that felt like something that he was kind of really against doing. So to see him back in the role was a big deal. And yeah, I think it's probably the most unified the Star Wars franchise may ever be again.
Yeah, because the next movie was called The Last Jedi. And here's my personal experience with The Last Jedi. I saw it opening night and loved it. If The Force Awakens was my high point of Star Wars fandom up until that point, this was the absolute peak. I love everything about that movie. I love the visuals. I love so many of the scenes. I love all of the new ideas presented. I love all of every character in that movie has an arc, and it all works. I think it's just a masterclass of a script. And even walking into that movie, I was not a huge Rian Johnson fan. I didn't really connect with Looper. I didn't like Brick. Like I didn't really know. I didn't really think much about Rian Johnson being the one behind it. But I loved that movie, and to me, it kind of kickstarts this very strong streak that Rian Johnson is currently on. I think he's just been riding high ever since. But I was I was all in, and this is not a Last Jedi episode, so I'm not going to get too deep in all the specific scenes, but like the Red Throne Room scene, the Holdo maneuver, I mean, there's just the Salt Planet, there's just such cool stuff in this movie. And again, I think I've described this on our podcast at some point, but just to recap, I walked out of that movie. I was on a Star Wars high. I open up the internet and this fist just flies out of my phone and punches me in the face because there is a backlash. And I don't want to oversell either point here. Like, The Last Jedi is a well-received movie. It's got great critic scores. It's got great audience scores. It made a ton of money. People like this movie. But the backlash and the vocal... I don't know, the people that don't like this movie were very vocal. And there's this undeniable backlash to that movie, which, look, we can talk about, but one thing I don't like doing is trying to argue two sides whenever we only have one side truly represented here. So I don't want to get too much into what people didn't like about it. I mean, there's people that don't like it. They're misogynistic reasons, stuff like that. We can just ignore those people. They're not worth talking about. But from a story standpoint, a lot of people did not like it. And I would sum that up by saying, I think what the people that love that movie and people that don't like that movie have in common is it did something different. Like, I like that it took Star Wars in a new direction, and that got me excited. But on the other side, people might say it was so different and no longer felt like Star Wars. I don't feel that way, but that's kind of a common complaint that I hear when people discuss that movie. So, not as universally loved as The Force Awakens, and it kind of splits the franchise. Andrew, where do you fall on The Last Jedi?
It's the second best Star Wars movie of the entire franchise.
Is
the best of the Disney Star Wars by, I wouldn't say by like a mile, because Rogue One's pretty great too, but it's the only thing it doesn't beat for me is Empire Strikes Back.
See, it's my personal favorite Star Wars. I can't. I don't know. I'd have to revisit the original trilogy and stuff to try to make a grand, it's the second best of all time or whatever. But I think that's a totally valid.
Now,
take.
I will say the audience score on Last Jedi is 42%. So it is very
Andrew,
plummeted. But
is that a true audience score, do you think?
That it's the same way that Captain Marvel, which is listed below it, has a 79% critic score and a 40% audience score.
We know
there is you can't really, and it's this tough line that I don't want to skew from. It's that I don't want to say that the people who don't like Last Jedi are not allowed their opinion. I don't want to say that their opinions are invalid. I don't want to go as far as to say that. But there is a very large vocal internet minority, I will say, that like these movies, that dislike these movies for the wrong reasons and weaponized their fellow members to trash these audience scores. That being said, I will admit Last Jedi is a mixed film. I remember, because I actually didn't see it opening night. I was living in Maryland when this came out. And
Maryland doesn't get movies opening night, famously. There's like a few day delay.
It was...
you got to wait for the stagecoach to bring the film in the town, and then
and then you have to wait for them to load it up, and the guy running the theater is not the most accurate person, and then I had to walk to the theater in snow, uphill both ways.
Right. It's a struggle.
It was a Herculean effort. No, anyway, I don't remember why I didn't see it opening night. I think I just wasn't super dialed in, or I don't know why, but I saw it like the next day, like it was the next Friday or something. And I think I got off work early, or maybe it was a Saturday. I don't remember. I'll probably look back through my AMC app and find out what day I specifically saw it, but that's a lot of work. But I remember going in, I saw people that were saying like, this is prequel level bad.
That's
like
insane.
I had a friend that said that.
Crazy.
I had a friend that said that. And I was just like, what? I was like, and so I'm watching it and I'm just kind of like, well, this is freaking awesome. And like, I'm just going through and I'm watching it and I get to the end and I'm just like, wait, why do we not like that's awesome. Like, why are we not liking this? And like I saw, and like there's so many weird, like there's so many different like phases of it too. Cause like I know people that genuinely think on a storytelling level it's bad. They think the script is all over the place and doesn't make any sense. I think those people are incorrect. And then there's like weird, like pedantic stuff. Like there's no lightsaber fight technically. And I was like, okay. And here's my sort of hot take about that. The prequels spoiled you guys on lightsaber fights because those original movies don't have a whole lot of them until Return of the Jedi. Like episode 4's got almost nothing. Like it's it's very limited in what kind of lightsaber stuff there is. And it's like, but that, yeah, like the throne room scene, it's like, oh, they're not fighting each other, they're fighting the Red Guard. And I was like, yeah, and it's awesome. And like, and they're like, well, what's Holdo doing? And I was like, she's blasting through that ship, and it's awesome. And it's like, well, what is Luke doing? It's like he's realizing the error of his ways and coming back to save the Resistance. It's awesome. Like, it's all stuff where, like, everything they mentioned, like, and one of the biggest things that gets said about Last Jedi is Canto Blight. They're like, well, what's the point of that? And I was like, it's
that
Finn.
drives me nuts. That drives me
I can't
insane.
believe it.
Okay,
drives
look,
me crazy.
I know I said I didn't want to do this, but look, I can't help it. I hear this all the time. That's the gambling planet, right? That people complain about. They're like, that whole scene serves no purpose, and I'm like, what? I've never
you didn't watch the movie then.
I've never felt more disconnected with like criticism, because like not everyone's gonna like the movie. That's fine. I get it. Like, there's no one movie that's gonna be universally loved. That's fine. You don't like it as much as I do. That's fine. But like, I don't understand. Like, for one, Andrew. First of all, it's a really fun scene, and like that's all it needs to be. But a lot more happens there. Finn's whole story arc depends on going to that planet, because the first movie sees Finn defect from the dark side, defect from being a stormtrooper, and he's just out there trying to survive and gets tangled up with our heroes. He has no place in this war. He just wants to get away and live his life. He goes to this planet, and God, I love Benicio del Toro's character. He's so weird, but he has the big speech about the same people that make the TIE fighters make the X-Wings. Same people make the good guy ships, make the bad guy weapons. And it's all about this ruling class is what benefits from the war, and the underclass suffers no matter what side that they are on. And his eyes are open to the way the universe works. And by seeing that in his heart, he can no longer not choose a side, Andrew, and he commits to being with the rebellion, being with the good guys, and fighting for what's right. And that's why whenever he comes face to face with Phasma and she calls him scum, he says, rebel scum.
Rebel scum.
He's just chosen his side because of what he experienced on that planet. And Andrew, it's awesome. It's so good.
It's awesome.
So look, I'm not saying, look, you can have criticism of that movie. You cannot like it.
And also, just the very idea that there is a ruling class that is funding both sides of this conflict, that is new material for Star Wars. A new concept, introducing a new ripple to this entire thing that has never been done before, and all people can do is go, Luke didn't slice enough stuff with his laser sword. Get out!
I would say it's a new ripple, but it also plays into, to me, if you were to try to find a theme across all 9 movies, it's that the universe is not black and white. And you always see characters trying to look at it as black and white, trying to see good guys versus bad guys, and that always blows up in their face. Our hero is always someone who's on the good side, but has a little bit of darkness in them, whether it's in their bloodline or their decisions. And you see, Darth Vader switch to the good side. You see Luke get tempted by the dark side. You see Rey get tempted by the dark side. She has Palpatine blood in her. Like, the whole point of Star Wars is that it's not black and white. There's gray. And I think that scene is just such a good example of that. And it still feels of a piece to me with Star Wars because of its ultimate message that it's not the world is not binary.
I completely agree.
That's anything you want to say about Last Jedi before we move on from there?
It's awesome. I'm not saying you're wrong if you don't like it, but I'm just saying that, like, I think the way I have always looked at Last Jedi is it is the movie everybody claims they want these blockbusters to do. People always get annoyed that these blockbusters are so formulaic, that they are so cookie cutter, that they are so paint by numbers, that they don't take any chances, they don't take any risks. This movie is not paint by numbers. It takes plenty of risks. It introduces new ripples to the franchise. And I'm not saying you can't dislike it for legitimate reasons, but if what is weighing on your mind when you watch this is that this is not what I would have done, I would simply ask that you try to watch the movie without that notion at the front of your mind. View it less as, I don't like this movie, or rather, what is stopping me from enjoying this movie is that it did not do what I wanted it to do, and instead try to look at it for what it is doing. And you may find that you still don't like it, and that's fine. But I think a lot of people don't give this movie a fair shake because of that. And I'm just saying, reach inside your mind.
Now, as we finally get to the Rise of Skywalker, we're about to set the stage a little bit here. We're going to get into all the positives, everything that we like. It's what we do. But I just want to acknowledge that this movie had a hell of an uphill battle. I mean, for one, it's capping off not only the Disney trilogy, but essentially the entire Star Wars story up until that point. It's well known that Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, was a crucial, or set to play a crucial role in the story. Sort of this whole Disney trilogy was based around our original three heroes each having their own movie, with Han Solo in the first one, and then Luke Skywalker, and then finally Princess Leia. And Carrie Fisher passes away before production starts on this movie. She dies before The Last Jedi is released, which I had to be reminded of as I was doing research.
Yep.
Like that's wild, because I remember seeing that movie in theaters, and you have that moment where Princess Leia gets sucked out of the ship, and it just hits you in a way that's even deeper than it would have, because you know that she has passed away. So that's a wild uphill battle. We know that the movie was originally set to be helmed by Colin Trevorrow, and that gets changed to J.J. Abrams, so that's a big uphill battle. And then finally, Disney wanted to address some of the backlash from the Last Jedi. So it had a lot of stuff working against it. I just think we got to acknowledge that. But all being said, the fact that I called The Last Jedi my peak of Star Wars fandom maybe tells you that this movie, where it might fall in my personal rankings. But I found a lot to enjoy, and that is what we're going to be diving into as we move into Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, a movie that was released December 20th, 2019. It's made on a budget of $416 million, which is
Jesus
insane.
I'm pretty sure that's the most expensive movie ever made.
But of course, at the box office, it clears $1 billion, $1.077 billion. I'm not gonna say a Star Wars movie is guaranteed to make $1 billion, but it's got a lot going for it, right? So it makes plenty of money. It comes out somehow in the green, with a budget that big. Critically, however, it is, well, let's say it's split. It holds a 51% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. That is across 527 reviews. So that is a lot of people being taken into account.
Large sample size.
Half are recommending it, half are not. Audience score is higher, as it tends to be, but it's much higher. It's 86% audience score. So while this movie ultimately is split, it of course does have its defenders, as all movies do, Andrew.
Absolutely. It is, but like I said, it was interesting to see critics kind of roundly really enjoy Last Jedi, and then with Rise of Skywalker kind of be like, feels like we may have stepped back a little bit. Whereas, like you said, that audience score, oddly off of less reviews though, which is interesting to note here. The Last Jedi is I believe it was a 42% off of over 100,000, whereas Rise of Skywalker is 86% based off of just over 50,000. So again, I'm not saying that the opinions are not valid. I'm just saying it feels like there was a much stronger desire to make sure your opinion was noted with Last Jedi than it appears to have been with Rise of Skywalker.
I agree. Let's take a look at the creative team behind the film. It's a little complicated because we have story credits from Derek Connolly, Colin Trevorrow, J.J. Abrams, and Chris Terrio. Now, only two of those people would actually get screenplay credits, and that's, of course, because we know pre-production was started with Colin Trevorrow at the helm before that gets switched over to J.J. Abrams. So I think it's clear there's definitely some ideas that carried over, hence the story credit, but really what we see here is the work of J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, which is an interesting pairing because Chris Terrio, we've talked about before, that's Ben Affleck's guy. He does like Argo and all the DC stuff that Ben Affleck is involved in. Like, he takes him anywhere that he goes. To my knowledge, looking through his filmography, I think this is his first time being paired up with J.J. Abrams. So it's just an interesting pairing. And then, as we know, the movie is directed by J.J. Abrams, who directed episode 7 and directed 2 Star Trek movies. It's still crazy to me that we've got one guy who helmed major productions in both of those franchises, but that's who we have behind the scenes here.
Yeah, J.J. Abrams becoming the first man since George Lucas to direct 2 different Star Wars films. It is
that is an interesting statistic.
Yeah, not the case with Star Trek, though. Plenty of people had directed 2 Star Trek movies before.
I guess it's not it's an interesting fact. I don't know why I call that a statistic. It's a fun fact, Andrew. I'm sorry.
It
Go
is.
Continue.
It's a fun stat. It's a fun stat.
Is it a stat?
No, I guess technically.
I think numbers are stats. What is a statistic?
I mean, two films directed by the same.
Statistically, he's directed more films than anyone besides, more Star Wars films than anyone besides George Lucas. Okay, sorry. It doesn't matter. Go ahead, Andrew. What was your next point?
Anyway, and then, but yeah, it was interesting. I remember when he was announced, people were kind of like, oh, people kind of thought he immediately wasn't in consideration because of the fact that he had just done Star Trek so recently. But at the time, J.J. Abrams was kind of seen as, I guess his stock was riding pretty high at the time. This would have been, Star Wars The Force Awakens comes out, what, 16, 15?
My mind says 15, but I'll check.
I think it's 15. It was before I left Houston, so it had to have been 15. Yeah, so it was December 5th, 2015 that Star Wars The Force Awakens comes out. And I want to say, like, in the lead up to this, which would have been 2012, 2013, his stock was pretty high. I mean, the only other nerd guy whose stock was probably that high at that time.
The lead up to this was 2018, 2019, Andrew.
I meant Force Awakens. Like, when that got announced and he was picked for
I see.
His stock was pretty high, though. That's my point. I think, arguably, the benefit of hindsight being what it is, the person who probably only had more nerd stock at the time might have been Joss Whedon after Avengers. Like, those guys were like, they're like, you got a big thing. You get these guys to do it. And how the benefit of time has aged that statement. But, so anyway, J.J. Abrams, like I said, I remember originally they announced all the directors. So it was J.J. Abrams was going to do a story. Who was the other scriptwriter on that? It was Michael Arndt, who did he did Toy Story 3. And then Lawrence Kasdan was the other writer on Force Awakens, who had done Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back. So with that first Force Awakens, they were bringing in some heavy hitters. It was J.J. Abrams directing, and then I think he got writing credits with Michael Arndt, Toy Story 3, everybody loves, and, a guy who did Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, a classic. You can't go wrong at that point. And like you said, by and large, people thought he nailed it. And then I actually remember when Rian Johnson was going to write, direct 8, and he was also going to write 9. There was a story originally that Rian Johnson was also going to write episode 9, and then Colin Trevorrow was going to direct it. And then at some point that switched to, before even Last Jedi came out, that switched to Trevorrow writing it with his classic writing partner, Derek Conley. And then a variety of things happen. I remember when Carrie Fisher passes, I was watching Arrival. I had walked into the theater to watch Arrival, and I walked out of the theater to Carrie Fisher had passed. So I've never rewatched that movie because I fear someone else will die when I finish watching it.
Oh, man.
But great movie that I've only seen once. But it's and so that happens. Colin Trevorrow, whether you believe the rumors or not, made a movie that was very poorly received on pretty much every conceivable level. I am sure we'll talk about it someday. Even if I have to force Chris to do it. But,
you bring it up a lot.
But ultimately, those two things. So you've got the failure of, you've got the mixed response to Last Jedi. You've got the Book of Henry, and you've got the passing of Carrie Fisher. And I think those three things all together kind of made Disney be like, all right, we got to take a step back. We got to figure out what's going on. And they go to J.J. Abrams again. They go back to J.J. Abrams and say, hey, we got to kind of figure this out. He brings in Chris Terrio, who like I said, wrote Argo, which I love. I love the script for Argo. I think it's absolutely fantastic. We've spoken about his other stuff already. We have gone down those paths already. I don't need to repeat them, but clearly has some chops. Like, you don't write a script like Argo by accident. And I will say this to their credit. This is another Herculean task. It's not a position I would want to be in, where you kind of have to figure out how to balance the response to Last Jedi with the passing of Carrie Fisher, but also you're kind of looking at what the other guys were going to do, and you can't really go in that same direction either, because otherwise Disney didn't really... There were plenty of other statements that Disney wasn't really liking that direction very much. So you've got to figure out something. And so I can't really say that it's a fun position to be in. I can't say that it's a place I would want to be in. But regardless, J.J. Abrams with Terrio in tow, step up to the plate here. We've talked about them all before in various capacities. I think, have we talked about J.J. Abrams before?
I don't think we've covered anything that he was a part of creatively, but I'm sure he's certainly come up.
Probably during Mission. No, we do any Mission. Oh, we probably talked about it a little bit on Mission Impossible because he does the next one. But either way, J.J. Abrams has done a variety of different things over the years. But like I said, starting in 2006, he does Mission Impossible, which leads to Star Trek, which leads to Star Trek Into Darkness, which segues into Star Wars. So he hit the franchises pretty hard there for a long time, and really hasn't done anything outside that.
He's got
largely. Go ahead.
Well, besides his directing efforts, he's got his fingerprints on a ton of stuff, like the what's the monster Cloverfield? Cloverfield, I guess you can call it a franchise at this point. Of course, the TV series, things like Lost, where he's Lost and Heroes. His name is attached to, even though creatively he's not on those movies, or he's not on those shows as much as people might think. But his name gets thrown around through a lot of different projects, and he helms and is helms a lot of projects, and his production studio is responsible for a pretty wide reach beyond just his actual directorial efforts.
Yeah, like I said, he's got, you look at his television list, Felicity, ironically enough, the first show that he creates and is a director and a writer for, which is nothing like anything else he's ever done. But even then, like, I want to say though, like, you know, reception to things aside, largely people mostly like what he does. I can definitely see why Disney in this moment would kind of be like, you know what, we'll just get Abrams back. We'll just use Abrams again. He's got a solid track record. Star Trek Into Darkness runs into a few issues just because, again, he kind of does his mystery box thing, and people kind of weren't feeling it when he was like really pretending that Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't playing Khan, and then it definitely turned out that he was.
Which is so weird. Like, would people, if you're gonna... Sorry, I don't need to go on that tangent. I don't know why they made the decision to try to hide that. I don't think it...
Abrams loves his mystery boxes. That's the other thing. A lot of his movies hinge on mystery boxes, and kind of weird little things that we're not sure about, or things that are, you know, he doesn't have to, and then the criticism is he doesn't really know how to resolve them, but or he leaves them to somebody else to resolve. But anyway, like I said, I don't want to have any of that take about it. Like, by and large, people tend to like what he does. Or at bare minimum, people are like, yeah, it's completely fine. Very
I feel like that was the reception to Super 8. People were like, yeah, it's not bad.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It's good.
Generally speaking, like, he's never made anything, I think, where people were like, ugh, until maybe this. But even then, the audience response here, pretty positive. So, but either way, the only thing I want to say on his behalf is, I know this, and it's why I kind of try not to speak too much about this movie, just because I know that position of like having to juggle all those things with the passing of Carrie Fisher, like all of that. I'm just like, that sucks, man. Like, that's just not a great spot to have to be in.
Yeah.
And he gave it the old college try in a way that I'm sure most of the rest of us couldn't. So,
well, Andrew, I think we have set the stage. It's time that we talk about this film, Star Wars Episode 9 - The Rise of Skywalker. How do they spell this out? Is it double colon? Is it a double colon title? Is it a run-on sentence?
The movie itself, I think, is only ever called Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Same, I think all of the sequel trilogy were technically just Star Wars title. Star
But surely
Wars
the
title,
opening
Star Wars
crawl
title.
says episode 9. Does it just say
Does
episode 9 and not the Rise of Skywalker? It doesn't say the Rise
It
of
probably
Skywalker
just says
in the
episode
opening
9.
scroll.
Or
So
does it?
you never officially see like all 3 of these titles at once.
Hold on.
It's very
Great
important we get this
podcasting.
right for some reason before we jump into this.
Well, lucky for us, it's the very first thing that the movie shows. So, let's see what it is. Just bring it up on the old YouTube.
Andrew, the first
ever-
thing it shows is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Well, you're
Actually.
actually a fucking liar because the first thing it shows is Lucasfilm. But then it says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You ever tried to watch a movie in your library on the web YouTube? It maxes it out at 480p.
I haven't. Just
It's ridiculous. Anyway, Star Wars. Star Wars. Getting smaller. Still says Star Wars, I think. Star Wars Episode 9. The Rise of Skywalker. So the title...
but it's got no
the title with-
punctuation, right?
No punctuation. It's just Star Wars space Episode 9 space The Rise of Skywalker, all caps.
All right. Well, that's the movie we're talking about. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Andrew, are you ready?
Yes.
The dead speak. The evil Emperor Palpatine has returned and plans to recruit Kylo Ren to carry out his master plan to rule the galaxy with a fleet of Star Destroyers. Meanwhile, Rey, Finn, Poe, and the rest of the Resistance must race to find where the Emperor is hiding and strike him down before it's too late. Andrew, for a 2.5 hour movie, I think it's a pretty straightforward synopsis, right? I mean, am I really missing any major turns here?
No,
That's the story. That's what we got.
it is.
We're gonna talk about it. We're gonna dive into it. But first thing we got to do is talk about the cast of this film. And as we always do, we're gonna start with the high point, the best casting and best performance of the movie. Because every episode we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award for The Rise of Skywalker?
I am going to be going with one of our new characters, one of the ones introduced in this trilogy. I'm going to be going with Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, the eventual general of the Resistance after General Leia's passing. And I think he does a great job here. Obviously, Oscar Isaac kind of blew up the last couple of years. You kind of see him all over the place now doing various different things. But I would say Star Wars is definitely one of the big things that kind of put him on the map, and kind of as far as putting him basically big in the public eye. And since then, obviously, he's done all of these. He's done, obviously, Moon Knight within the Marvel Universe, and doing tons of stuff all over the place now. But here, he is kind of front and center. We've got kind of Rey's kind of journey that she eventually kind of goes on herself. But Oscar Isaac is present for all of that. And I think this is really where he takes the lessons of the last film. And obviously, they come to a form of fruition where he is actually put in charge. And I think he's really kind of owning the role here. I think it's the most comfortable he maybe feels in the role throughout the whole series. He's got to learn some hard lessons in the last film, but in this one, he's able to move forward and kind of become the leader that the Resistance needs. And I'm a big fan of it. I like Oscar Isaac pretty much in everything he's in, but even the weird stuff he does, he's got all of these mainstream things that he does, but he also does a weird variety of independent things as well. So you can kind of see him all over the map, but here he is kind of inhabiting this role just perfectly. Contrasted very much so against something like Miguel O'Hara in Across the Spider-Verse, where he's just terrifying. So,
Man, the line at his booth at a con, he's got Spider-Verse, he's got Spider-Man, he's got MCU, he's got Star Wars, he's got X-Men, because he is an alum of the show. He played Apocalypse.
He is.
In
He's got
X-Men
Dune.
Apocalypse.
He's got Dune.
My God.
He's got the new Addams Family animated films they did, where he's Gomez. He's got those too.
Oh, I'm sure
He's
tons of
got-
people want his poster on an Adams.
He's
Family.
got the A24 people from Ex Machina. This guy, everyone's
A24 fan.
going to his line.
He,
Everyone's going to his line.
Ex Machina is definitely the performance that made me go like, whoa, like this guy is special. That's definitely what it's not the first movie I saw him in, but the first one he really popped in. Also Drive, I think, is pretty big for him. Definitely a very popular movie. But yeah, I love
He is in Drive. I forget about that.
Yeah,
I really do
he's
forget
kind
in
of,
Drive.
for someone who looks so distinct, to me it's like his half open eyes are just really distinct. He's kind of a chameleon with his performance.
Yeah.
He sneaks up in things. Like he's in
Inside Llewyn Davis is probably the same thing. Like he's just, I forget that he's literally Llewyn Davis in that movie. So
I haven't seen it, but I have seen Annihilation, which he
Yes.
is also in. Yeah, the dude's been in a lot, made a very impressive filmography in a short amount of time. But I love the character of Poe. I love him across all three movies. I think he's a great pick for Mark Strong for this movie because we kind of see the culmination of his story arc. You know, he starts off as sort of a cowboy, a space cowboy, if you will, who kind of strikes first, asks questions later, and is gung-ho to get the job done at any cost. And as you said, he learned some hard lessons. And here we see him finally evolve to be a leader, depend on a team, work with people, and most importantly, I think, bet on optimism, bet on people choosing do the right thing, which was something that he did not have a lot of trust in at the beginning of his story. So I think it's great for as many quote unquote, problems as this trilogy has carrying out a consistent story. I think his arc remains pretty clear across all three films. It comes to culmination here, and he has a lot of chemistry on screen with John Boyega as Finn, who will be receiving my Mark Strong Award for this film. I love this casting. I love this character. I mean, all three of our new cast characters, or four, I should say, because you have to throw Kylo in there. I think they absolutely nailed just interesting characters, great casting. It's awesome. Big success of the Disney Star Wars movies. But John Boyega, he pops in all three movies, but I love what he's doing here. And a lot of it is, like I said, with his chemistry with Poe. They have so much chemistry that there is plenty of fan fiction about them being an item. And honestly,
pretty sure there's a whole section on Tumblr dedicated to just that.
And it's not even like, it's not much of a stretch, I think, to even extrapolate that from this movie. But I think he's got great chemistry with Poe, as well as Daisy Ridley as Rey. He sort of becomes the heart of the Resistance in a way, which we kind of talked about his story arc earlier in this episode, where he finally chooses a side, and everyone sort of got on this new team, this new rebel team, everyone kind of has a connection through Finn. Which, has come a long way since being a stormtrooper. I think it's a great story, cool idea for a character. I think John Boyega is just rules. He's so good. And he really runs the gamut from being like funny and lighthearted to being totally serious when he has to be. And again, I just want to highlight one more time his chemistry with Oscar Isaac. There's this moment where Poe comes up and he's like, I'm sorry, we should be doing this together. We should be doing a team. And John Boyega, or Finn, starts his sentence. He's like, yeah, I think, then he pauses. He's like, well, thanks for saying that. And then he continues with the point that he's trying to make. It's great. So, Mark Strong Award, John Boyega.
I don't know, Chris, have you ever seen Attack the Block?
I have not.
You should. It's awesome. And he's awesome in it. So,
what did you say? He's the Mark Strong of that movie as well?
That's a tough one. That's a big movie, but
Okay.
he's
I'll
certainly in the top level for it.
Put it on my wish list. I'll check it out.
It's awesome. It is genuinely awesome. It is Joe Cornish made that, wrote and directed it. He's one of the guys that was kind of in the Edgar Wright circle. I don't think he's directed. He's directed one movie since then. So that was 2011. He made Attack the Block, but Attack the Block is fantastic. He is absolutely amazing in that movie, and Attack the Block is just amazing. It's just I'm not even going to tell you what it's about. You watch it and find out nothing about it before you watch it, and then just enjoy. But anyway, John Boyega's great. He's great in pretty much
I don't mean to
everything
interrupt.
he's in.
I
Yes,
just
go
said
ahead.
something. My ultimate just watch it and don't read about it movie is Sorry to Bother You. Have you seen this one, Andrew? I can't remember
Yes,
if we
I
talked
have.
about it. Okay.
Yes.
Any
That's the,
listeners?
What's his name? Keith Stanfield?
Yeah. Tessa Thompson, Stephen Yeun. It's got a ton of great people in there.
You are not ready for what that movie is.
Yeah, but don't look anything up. Don't watch the trailer. Don't
Nope.
read about it. Just watch the
No.
movie. Trust me, it's great.
Yep, fantastic. But anyway, John Boyega's great. I even just heard recently good things about They Clone Tyrone, which was a sci-fi comedy with him and Jamie Foxx and a bunch of others. But it's he's great, and he's great here. Like you said, we're kind of he's now dedicated to the resistance. He's in the thick of it now, and he believes in the cause. And he gets a really interesting arc here where they kind of are introducing this idea that he's force sensitive, which I think is a really cool ripple. Additionally, I like it the same way that I really like Donnie Yen from, say, Rogue One, where you've got this guy who's a really, really good fighter and isn't even necessarily force sensitive, but believes in the force. And so I like introducing these kind of ripples beyond just being a force user, of having somebody that maybe can't use the force, but is sensitive to the force, potentially feels like the force in a small way. And then also the idea of somebody who can't even feel the force, but just believes in its power. And it's an interesting little thing to kind of introduce in some of these movies. And yeah, it's cool. Great pick, Chris.
Daisy Ridley plays Rey, and I already said, great casting, great performance. She's our hero. We talked about J.J. Abrams having this Herculean task. Daisy Ridley has a very big task to be the Luke Skywalker of this trilogy, essentially. One thing I do love about our three new heroes, our original trilogy was based around three heroes, as is the Disney trilogy, but it's not a one-to-one. It's not simply this character is this character. She's definitely in the Luke position, but she is a woman, for one. She takes on a lot of Carrie Fisher's role. And then Poe Dameron is kind of like Han Solo, but he's much more involved as an actual rebel force rather than an outsider. And Finn is really hard to find a one-to-one because he comes from the dark side and crosses over. So I like that they base it around three people again, but have their own kind of spin, kind of remixed everything. So she does such a good job, again, across all three films. In this one, really, she's selling the conflict inside of her. She knows that she has a dark power inside, doesn't know why until this film, when she learns about her lineage and gets tempted to the dark side and has to choose to be for good. I mean, it's not, I would say her arc is not new, not just in Star Wars, but across storytelling in general. It is a classic story, but that's not a negative whatsoever. Like it's a tried and true formula for a reason. I think she's up to the task. I see so many young Star Wars fans that love Rey and dress up as Rey, and I think that alone is just so cool that, Star Wars is for everyone, and I think this character existing does a lot. And again, more pressure on Daisy Ridley's shoulders, but she never falters and she always delivers.
Absolutely agreed. Like the arc of like fighting against your quote unquote family, your quote unquote nature, your quote unquote destiny. It's very straightforward. That's why I view Daisy Ridley the same as Hellboy and Spawn. Those are just three characters with the exact same arc.
Yeah, everyone says
it. Yeah, it's Hellboy, Daisy, it's Hellboy, Rey, and Spawn, just right in a row there.
I remember people walking out the theaters like, well, it was good. It was a little derivative of Spawn, but I really enjoyed.
You guys
Star
seen
Wars.
Hellboy? You seen this? You heard about this? No. So she's kind of trying to live up to her destiny, and she's also still got in her mind that she can potentially still bring Ben back from the dark side. That's something this movie leans into very heavily. is this idea that she's not going to give in to what the Emperor wants. She's not going to give in to what Kylo wants. She even says, she's like, I wanted to take your hand, but I didn't want to take Kylo Ren's hand. I wanted to take Ben's hand. And so like you said, it's a very prominent position to sit. A lot of weight on those shoulders, but I think she does a fantastic job. And she'll be back. That is a piece of news that was shared throughout some of the Disney, I believe it was Star Wars Celebration this year, that a new film directed by Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, who makes her own films. She's a Pakistani filmmaker, also directed some episodes of Miss Marvel, will basically be following Rey as she attempts to rebuild the Jedi Order after this movie, which you think we would have learned our lesson doing that by now, but apparently not. Well, it'll be different this time for sure.
Will it be different
Hashtag
this time?
PP.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm excited to see this character return, though. Obviously, they've not yet. Ridley is the only one they've announced is returning. I think they've said it takes place 8 to 10 years after Rise of Skywalker. And they've not yet indicated anybody else will be returning. As much as I like a lot of these characters, I'd be fine if they didn't. Not these stories
have they
don't
said
all
if
have
it's
to
a standalone or is it like episode?
I think
10?
they've implied very much that I think they maybe have learned their lesson and they're just announcing this as a one thing, and we'll see what happens with that. Which I think is perfectly fine. There's plenty of ways to leave something open to more without needing to kind of be like the beginning of the new Star Wars saga. Like, take the pressure off, guys. But Ridley will be back, and I think that's very cool. I think it potentially also can reignite a little bit of love for these previous films as well. So, and I think they also hinted that maybe some of the other characters can come back. But like I said, I'd be fine with that. You know, you kind of get this weird thing where like the stories feel like they have to resolve around the same characters, and they don't have to. So we can go in different places and do different things. And I am excited to see what they could potentially do with more of this character.
And then we have Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Probably my favorite new character in the Disney Star Wars. My introduction to Adam Driver, and I think he's just one of the best out there. I love the choices he makes. I love the other stuff he's in. Logan Lucky, which you finally watched it, right?
I did.
It's awesome. He's awesome in it.
The same year as Last Jedi. He does Last Jedi and Logan Lucky in the same year.
That's cool.
That will always be amazing.
Marriage Story is very, very good. The dude,
BlacKkKlansman.
He makes interesting choices, different choices, has a variety, and it's just Andrew. Adam Driver is an interesting person just to look at. Just look at this guy, and then add on top of that his voice, which is a little strange. It's kind of deep. It's not what you would expect, and then you add to that his wide chest that we see in the last shot. He's just an interesting. I'm not even like, these aren't insults. I'm not saying he's like ugly or attractive. He's just interesting as hell to look at. And I think again how our three heroes aren't one for one with characters we've seen before. I think this is a brand new take on our bad guy figure, where he sort of idolizes his grandpa, but obviously for the wrong reasons, and doesn't want to walk in anybody's steps. He wants to burn it down and do his own thing. I think it's all very cool. And it's I don't know, maybe Last Jedi he'd be taking my Mark Strong.
I was about to ask. I was like, would he get the Mark Strong for Last Jedi? And I think there's a strong argument for that. Mark Hamill might probably the other one in the running for that, as far as I'm concerned, just because he's really good in that. That was actually the one where I was like, man, Mark Hamill, you should do this more often. Just act. Turns out you're pretty good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I love his voice stuff too, but absolutely.
He's in the new Netflix Fall of the House of Usher series, where he plays like the family's like skeezy lawyer who always uses like legal loopholes to get them out of trouble, because they're like they're a pharmaceutical company who clearly doesn't do things properly. So he's just always getting them out of trouble. He's the guy that like when the defense is like giving arguments in court, he's like staring down doing a crossword puzzle. Like, it's a completely different type of role for Mark Hamill, but he's so good at it. And I was just like, man, this dude's just really good at this.
I think I go Adam Driver for Last Jedi because just to highlight a scene I talked about with you before we hit record, when he's trying to turn Rey and he gets frustrated and he says, "You're still holding on." Like, I love his delivery of that line. And I love that he is not saying, "Come to the dark side." He's saying, "Let go and join me." Like, it's a different call to action. It's a different appeal. It's a different way to turn someone. It's saying, forget that stuff and join me. Not necessarily, again, he never says, "Come to the dark side." It's not the same as Palpatine or Darth Vader trying to turn people. So it's a whole new wrinkle, a whole new take on a bad guy, and God, he's just so good.
He's very good. I like Adam Driver a lot. He's actually going to be in a new biopic about Enzo Ferrari coming out, I believe, at Christmas, directed by Michael Mann, which means it's either going to be awesome or terrible. So I am,
Hashtag PP, but
hashtag PP.
I have similar feelings about Michael Mann's movies.
It's really a dice roll. I think if anything, this one is probably going to be held together almost exclusively by Adam Driver as Enzo Ferrari, no less. So I'm actually really looking forward to seeing that. But he does a great job here. He's got an interesting role to play here, where he is kind of stuck. At the end of the last movie, he kind of, he swipes Snoke off the map and he's ready to take control. But then he finds out that there's this guy pulling the strings, Palpatine, and he doesn't really know what to do with that. And you can see that he kind of struggles with it. And then ultimately he does make his turn back. And it is just a tough place to sit. It's a tough role to play, to kind of have it to be the dark side and then also kind of show this slow redemption. But Driver's up to the task. He is a really, really interesting villain. And I think, like I said, he's definitely in the running for Mark Strong when it comes to Last Jedi. But not to say that he's doing a bad job here. There's a lot of people bringing their A game here, really trying to make this the best that it can be. But Driver is no exception there.
Carrie Fisher as Leia. It would feel wrong not to talk about it, but
I kind of don't want to, though. It feels wrong.
Okay, it's not a performance. Let's just acknowledge that. They reuse existing footage. I'm not sure how far they go with like deepfakes or AI voices. I don't know entirely what they did to piece this together, but she's in the film. She has a presence. Like I said, I don't think there's much we can say about the performance in this film because, again, it's not a performance. They just want to make sure that her presence is there. And we will talk, when we get to scenes, we'll talk about her final scene and what exactly that means. But I just want to acknowledge Carrie Fisher as Leia. It just, across Star Wars and in the previous two films, her, maybe more than any of the returning cast, whenever she was on screen, I was just like, man, it's good to see you. It's good to see that you seem to be doing good and you're bringing this warmth. And even that wasn't really her role in the original trilogy. Like, she was kind of, she was like a firecracker in those movies. But in the Disney era, she's just like this nice, warm presence. Everyone respects her. Everyone loves her. It's great. I love her presence across these movies.
Alum of the show from our Scream 3 episode.
Right. Yeah.
She is. She's just wonderful. And like you hear about like the struggles that she had with substances and things like that, and being able to overcome it and the advocacy that she then brought forth. It is even just her struggles with mental health. She brought a lot of that to the forefront. The fact that she was able to, control all of that, conquer her demons and kind of get to where she was and have that kind of last hurrah as Princess Leia. You love to see it. And like I said, you see her on screen and it was probably, like you said, it was probably the biggest moment of just like, I'm really glad everybody got to come back and do this once, but I'm really glad you got to do it. And she's a bright spot of all of these movies. And clearly she was meant for big things for this movie, and it's a shame we didn't quite get to see those, but it is good to see her here. And it's like I said, I mentioned this is it's the best of a tough situation where like you can't really you could have easily just been like, and then Leia passed on the way back to her home planet. Like you could have done something like that and just written her out of the movie.
Put it in the opening scroll or something. Yeah.
Somehow Leia's not here, But
Oh God.
sorry, I'm sorry, folks. I'm really sorry, but it's it's oh man, that's going on the list when I meet St. Peter at the gates. That's for sure. But um, it is. But anyway, I understand why they went with the decision. Obviously, her daughter Billie Lourd shows up in a lot of these movies as well. She's in this one, and I'm sure, and I think even Billie Lourd is the double they used for the flashback as well. So, the family obviously giving some level of approval slash endorsement here. So I think that eases the sting a little bit. But it's good to see her here.
And we have two other legacy characters that return for one key scene each in this movie. I think we can talk about that when we talk about those scenes, because it is so centralized to that one scene. But another returning character is Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. I'm sure this was a known thing before the movie came out, but I guess wasn't following it too closely because I did not know he was going to be in this movie until he showed up on screen. I was watching in theaters, and it's cool as hell to see Lando. First of all, Billy D. Williams is cool as hell. Lando's cool as hell. Andrew, I do have a question for you about this performance. Because everything Billy D. Williams says is so cool. And he's laying it on thick every line. Was that always Lando? Does he do that in the original trilogy? I haven't seen it in a while. Is that, or is he pulling like a late stage Sean Connery where he leans into the things that people know they like about his voice?
I feel like here he's definitely, it's a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily say like, I would say it's more Sean Connery than it is just that's how he talks now. I think as Lando, he's definitely laying it on a little thick here, and
it's not a complaint at all. It's, it's
not at all.
Cool as hell. It makes me want to
cool
talk.
As hell. Colt 45, man, the OG.
But how'd you feel having Lando back, seeing him again?
It's gonna be cool. There's no way.
Yeah.
Lando, like that dude's cool, man. He's always been cool.
Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. This, God, I think this is really good. And what is so impressive about this is C-3PO has been in, I don't know, is he in all 9? He's being built in episode 1. He's been in a lot of Star Wars.
He talks in all of them. He absolutely talks in all
Does
of them.
he? Okay. So we've seen him in every movie, which is crazy, across, 4 decades or whatever. But he still works. Like the challenge of this character, and this depends a lot on not just the performance, but the writing from movie to movie, is that he is annoying. He is an annoying droid. But he's still annoying here, but they get comedy out of it in such smart ways. Some of my biggest laughs in this movie are from C-3PO and the way the characters that react to him. I think he's written so well and used very well in this movie. At this point in the Star Wars franchise, we are getting a lot of nostalgic characters and legacy characters. People pop in and, sometimes they're kind of just there just because it's nice to have them come back. But he is woven into the story pretty well that feels natural and quote unquote justifies him being in this movie. And I think that is just a pretty remarkable effort this late into the Star Wars canon. And the fact that Anthony Daniels, he's been there since day one, right? He's the only C-3PO and he's still killing it and steals some scenes. And not just in this movie, like his Red Arm stuff from The Force Awakens is also really fun. It's impressive. They make a annoying droid work so well.
I don't know if there's a single man on the planet who has played a character more times than Anthony Daniels has played C-3PO, just looking at his filmography.
Did he do like the droids cartoon and everything? Is he always C-3PO?
Like I'm looking at if there's a movie and C-3PO is in it, it's him. He also cameos as the character in Ralph Breaks the Internet. He has a sort of cameo in Solo as somebody else. Rogue One, he's got a cameo. All is C-3PO. When you get to television, he's in the holiday special. He's in the Muppet Show. He's in Sesame Street. He's in the Droids Show. He's in a show called The Great Heap, which I guess is just a spinoff of Star Wars Droids. Magical World of Disney, Star Wars Droids, The Pirates and the Prince, Clone Wars again, Robot Chicken, Lego Star Wars Rebels, Droid Tales,
Wow.
Star Wars Force to Death. Like, it's all, if C-3PO is in it, it is Anthony Daniels. So he has probably played this character, if you count individual episodes, well over 100 times.
He deserves some
no
kind
way.
of like Star Wars Lifetime Achievement Award because, again,
Absolutely.
C-3PO is no one's favorite character, right? But his consistent presence and the fact that he's so dedicated and plays it so well, like it's got to be recognized.
Absolutely. And apparently he was in the suit at least for Force Awakens because they made a whole new thing for him that was using 3D printing that apparently allowed him to move around a heck of a lot more than he did in the first times around. So I'm guessing he was probably in all of them. And like I said, here he gets a lot more to do. In the last two movies, he really was kind of just like he was there, but he wasn't really doing much. He was just kind of reacting to stuff that was kind of happening around him. But here he actually kind of goes on the adventure. He kind of gets to be a part of the action. He actually has a sizable role to play in things unfolding. And he is the reason we get to meet the greatest character of all, Babu Frick. So,
Hey!
it's
Babu Frick rules.
It's C-3PO, man. What can you say? It's 3PO.
3PO, it's Threeps.
It's Threeps. It's Threeps.
And then we have Naomi Aki as Jonna, a new character, not just Disney Star Wars new, but new to this very film. She, like Finn, is a former stormtrooper who has defected and is seemingly already made the decision to be with the rebels, ends up joining arms with Finn in the final battle. And man, it's a tall task to be in a Star Wars movie, to be a new character introduced so late. You've got so little time to make an impression, and I think she does. It seems like there's probably plans to see this character again. There's this sort of subplot where it's implied she's Lando's daughter. We can talk about that when we get to scenes, but I think we'll see more of her, and I think that's a good thing, Andrew.
I agree. Like I said, it's interesting to kind of see the ripples potentially of Finn defecting. There were previous versions of this movie that had him kind of leading a stormtrooper uprising, but we kind of used that plot here a little bit to kind of show that, first off, the First Order is conscripting these guys as kids, which is super messed up. Just in case you weren't sure, those were the bad guys. They're the bad guys. But just showing that, eventually the goodness is winning out. These people are, the original idea was they were all clones that were basically programmed to be troopers, basically. They weren't really, this wasn't, there wasn't really a whole lot of free will there necessarily, or if it was, they were just programmed to be this way. And that's always kind of been the joke for a while over the later films is, how many people in the, Empire were just people living their lives. It's a whole joke in Clerks, how many of those guys were just contractors, just guys that were like, just trying to make my 11.5 and I get blown up because the resistance once it's taken out. The joke too, like I saw plenty of jokes about the new Spider-Man game when Venom kind of rampages through Oscorp Tower. It's like, imagine that being your first day working Oscorp security and Venom just breaks your back. Which at least in that case, Venom's the bad guy. But but to see that kind of idea of stormtroopers rising up against the resistance, they don't do it quite as outright here, but it's interesting to see that that idea continue on. And I think she is a big part of why that works so well. I did not realize this, but she was actually the lead of the recent Whitney Houston biopic, however we call those, which I did not see, but I heard she was quite good in. So might have to now.
Jamal Gleason plays General Hux, another new character across all three Star Wars films. I really like this character, and I think one of the coolest things this movie does is the revelation about this character, that he's actually a mole. He's a spy within the First Order. He's actually a good guy. And I like that because it's a late stage twist that totally tracks when you go back and watch these movies again. He's constantly, seemingly, battling for power with Kylo Ren. Which one's the number 2, the number 3, who's next in charge. And he kind of comes across like as petulant against Kylo, just not so friendly rivalry they have, and his frustration with Kylo has been comedic throughout. But now that we know that he's a spy, his anger at Kylo takes on this other layer. And like I said, it retroactively still works. That's why I think it's such a smart twist, because I really don't think that was the idea from the beginning. I wouldn't guess it was. But whether it was planned all along or they realized they could do this later, it still totally fits. So I really like his performance. I like his rivalry with Kylo. I wish we got more out of him. His story comes to an abrupt end in this film. But Domhnall Gleeson, just I like him as an actor again. Ex Machina alongside Poe Dameron over there. But Andrew, you've got to love this character. I mean, talk about representation in Star Wars.
I hate you. But yeah, man, a redhead that gets killed on screen with little fanfare.
He made it across 3 movies, though. That's pretty good.
This guy's got to have quite the long line at conventions as well. He's got that Harry Potter cred. He's got that Dread cred. He's got the A24 cred. And he's got the Star Wars cred. So
that's him and Dread, right? He's the guy that looks like Shaggy.
Yeah. Which, without a beard and scraggly long hair, he kind of looks like him.
Yeah.
He's also in a movie with his dad called Calvary, which is very, very good. Directed by Neil McDonough's brother, John, who also makes very, very good, fun movies. For those of you not sure, Brendan Gleeson is Domhnall Gleeson's dad, and they're both very, very good. Brendan Gleeson, you guys may know him from In Bruges, also Harry Potter, also
Mission Impossible 2?
Yes. He's fantastic. And it took me a long time to realize that he was that Brendan Gleeson was his dad. It just wasn't clicking for me for some reason. But yeah, he's fantastic. And even the recent Banshees of Inisherin, and it sees the talent continued on to his children. But yeah, it's kind of a shame how little he ends up having to do here. The idea of him being a mole is really only introduced within this film. And it is something that, they probably could have gotten a little bit more out of, but it does add some very interesting ripples to the character. And I like it.
And then we have Kerry Russell as Zori Bliss, another new character, and a character that I love and feels Star Wars as hell to me. Like, she's got a unique look, a cool helmet. She's mysterious. You don't see anything other than her eyes for like one scene. She's got this complicated past with Poe Dameron. She's not really a good guy, but helps the good guys, ends up with them. And we don't learn a lot about her. And there's nothing in this movie that's like, well, I'm off to my next adventure. I'll see you on Disney Plus in 2 years or whatever. This character may return. There may be spinoffs, but if this is all we get, it's cool enough for me. And it's very Boba Fett in that way. Like the first Boba Fett appearances, you see very little of him. He's just cool as hell, and you want that toy. A lot of the same appeal here. I really love that. As far as characters introduced in this movie, probably my second favorite. And be cool to see more of her. And if we don't, like I said, it's good enough. Kerry Russell, obviously a longtime collaborator with J.J. Abrams, dating back to Felicity. He brings her back a lot. She's got a small part in Mission Impossible 3, another small role here, and crushes it as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. I think she does a great job here. Like I said, it's a small role. You got a little bit of insight into Poe's past here. They kind of have a running gag that he knows how to do a lot of, they call it shady stuff, but what they mean is you're doing stuff a criminal would do. But we find out that there was a bit of a past there where he was a spice runner, which just makes me think of Dune. So I'm guessing he was Luke Atreides, and then after he died, he somehow came back as Poe Dameron to now not be a spice trader.
As someone who has not seen Dune still, I just think of him like with a backpack of paprika, which is illegal for some reason.
Yep.
And he's got to get it across the border.
Sorry, I forgot you hadn't seen Dune. Spice is a big thing there. But it's basically cocaine, folks. But turns out when you give a bunch of dudes cocaine, they start arguing over it. But That's Dune in a nutshell, people. But yeah, Kerry Russell, glad to see her here. Fun little small part.
And Andrew, we should talk about what is ultimately our big bad of not only this movie, but the entire Skywalker saga, as they call it. Ian McDiarmid returns as Emperor Palpatine. I say returns, I don't know to the extent how often, how long he has played him. I think he's definitely coming back from the prequels. You can kind of fill me in on any other times he might have played the character, but I also don't know how much is him on set in makeup and how much is him just lending the voice, but the voice is what it's all about. Do it, right? I mean, like, that is the Emperor. It is scary and menacing and typical bad guy stuff. It's also a bit of a meme at this point with how much the prequels have been memed to death. But look, #PP. I've got some mixed feelings about bringing the Emperor back this late in the game. But if you're going to do it, you've got to bring this guy back to do it because he does it so well.
Oh, yeah.
He's so synonymous with the performance. So at least I appreciate that. If you're going to do it right. And they did by bringing back Ian McDiarmid.
Yeah, he has played the character basically ever since Return of the Jedi. In Empire Strikes Back, I think it was actually a woman. I can't remember what her name was that did the visual, and then somebody else did the voice. But ever since Return of the Jedi, he has played this character. And the special edition of Empire Strikes Back, they replaced the original people with him.
Okay.
So they went back. And so if you're watching episode 5 now, it is him. But it was not him originally.
I wonder if that affects residuals for the original performers who are no longer in the movie.
I would be curious, but also I will, I guess, to whatever degree, give Lucas some credit that he did all of that before that was really a super huge concern, especially in the streaming world. But
yeah.
I am curious what that means for like television and stuff. But like,
or like,
last time I saw Star Wars on television.
When was the last time I saw television, period, Andrew? Does Hayden Christensen now get residuals for
a movie he wasn't alive when it was made?
Jedi? Yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know.
He uses his likeness. He's got to get paid for it. That's interesting.
I assume, yeah, it's very weird. And like, do the old like Return of the Jedi is not too bad because the guy who still plays old Darth Vader is still in it.
Right.
So, like,
he's not replacing.
Still,
yeah. He's not taking someone out of the movie completely, but yeah. Okay.
Interesting. I don't know. Great question, Chris. Anyway, you're right though. If you're going to do this, you got to do it right. You got to bring this guy back. You have to use him. I mean, you could bring in Clancy Brown and it would be awesome, but it wouldn't be right. So, Flubber alum Clancy Brown, but and it's, like I said, the Return of Palpatine has been memed to death. There's nothing else we need to say about it. But like I said, if you're bringing the guy back, do it right. You got to get Ian to do it. And yeah, he's first shot of him in this movie. I'm just like, dang, dude, you should have gone to the doctor sooner.
And Andrew, I mean, this is a long movie with a deep cast. There's plenty of other small parts we could talk about. I think we've covered all of our major bases.
Yeah,
we're
like an hour and a half in, and we haven't even gotten to the movie, man.
Andrew, this is gonna be a 6-hour podcast. All right, just buckle in.
I know it is.
But I want to shout out one more person. Is what I'm getting at. Kelly Marie Tran returns as Rose Tico. Now, she is a character introduced in The Last Jedi and plays a pivotal role there. She is this bright, optimistic character who plays an instrumental role in the story of Finn, because her character, even in the face of tragedy, even losing her sister to this cause, remains dedicated to doing the right thing and choosing her side and fighting with the rebels, and inspires Finn to join that side and teaches him a valuable lesson about what it means to fight along the rebels, what it means to persevere and spread the message of kindness to recruit people to your cause. It's not all about blowing up ships and sacrificing yourself. Pivotal, major character. After that movie, she is literally bullied off of social media with a deluge of sexist and misogynistic comments and racist vitriol. It's an awful thing, Andrew. And
it's worse than awful, man. It's generally like it's subhuman to act in such a way. It's genuinely offensive to me to watch people behave in such a way over your movie about wizards waving around lightsabers.
#PP, it's unfortunate that her role is so diminished here. And
Extremely.
I can only imagine it is not in response to the bullying, but in response to the backlash of the film itself, where they try to downplay elements from The Last Jedi. It's like, I don't like that. But I still want to shout out Kelly Marie Tran. She is in this movie. She's still playing roles. I think she's doing a great job. I think she could have done a lot more, but she is a great actor. She's great in that role, and she's great as Rose Tico.
Yes, and yes.
Andrew, yeah, I do think it's time that we talk about the scenes of this film, though. It's a lot to talk about. It's a long movie, and we are going to dive in specifically with our favorite scenes, best scenes of the film. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the absolute best scene of Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker?
This one's it's a little tough for me to kind of parse it out specifically. They do this trick a couple of times in the movie, but my favorite scene is probably when this happens in Last Jedi, and Abrams reuses it here, because if you're going to borrow from the best. But it's this, Rey and Kylo would have conversations in two different places, but they would kind of weave the footage together to make it look like they're in the same place. They would use, special effects and camera trickery to kind of have the location changing while they're speaking. They do that a couple of times here, but there's a particular one they do that I really, really like, when they have gone to Kijimi, where Babu Frick is. And this is the C-3PO plot of him being able to decipher this clue of finding out where our Sith Wayfinder is. And it is when Rey recovers that dagger, she kind of finds Kylo's quarters, and they kind of reach out, and they have this big conversation where her lineage is revealed to her for the first time, that she is Palpatine's granddaughter, and her parents basically, as kind of in keeping with how her character is, rejected the lineage. They didn't want Palpatine to get a hold of his granddaughter. They didn't want her to be a part of that legacy, so they gave her up to protect her. This is obviously steep contrast to Kylo revealing in the last film they were nobody, but he adds on to that by revealing they were nobody by choice here. But they're cutting back and forth, and they eventually even have a bit of a lightsaber duel. And I just think it's super cool, because they're doing all of this. You've got Rey, who's up on Kylo's ship, so you've got these bright white backgrounds, versus Kylo, who's down on this planet with the dark, kind of dimly lit cityscape, and we're cutting back and forth. He slices a basket of berries on the planet they're on, and the berries spill out onto the ship.
So cool. So cool.
And at one point, they smash the kind of pedestal that he keeps Vader's mangled helmet on. Bro, how'd you find that? And it scatters and smashes into his side, and that's how he figures out where she is. Just very cool visually. Like I said, obviously, we're riffing off of those ideas from before, but taking it a bit of a step further by adding in the conflict and kind of the actual fighting piece of it. And it just looks super cool, man. It just looks awesome. It's a big pivotal moment as Rey kind of finds out what, we've gotten some clues. Like, we know who she is kind of by this point, but she doesn't know yet. And, we've seen clues, obviously uses the Force lightning. And then this is kind of the big moment where she finds it out. And it's just cool. It's visually probably my favorite moment in the film. Again, we're talking about using those color palettes to our advantage to create this contrasting. Like, we'll be in the white room, and we'll be panning around, and then we cut to Kylo's back is kind of the focus of the shot, so it's white on one side as we pan around, and then as we come out the other side, we're back on the cityscape, and it's just very visually unique, very, very cool. And like I said, adding in the lightsaber piece of it takes it a step further, and just fantastic. Just, it's not a long scene, couple of minutes, but it's the moment where the movie is catching me the most.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's one of the coolest ideas this movie has. Like I said, it's building a swing from The Last Jedi, taking it one step farther. And it's movie magic, 100%. Because Last Jedi, they talk to each other. You see them looking slightly off camera, but you don't see what exactly they're seeing. You never get the reverse shot where, like, do they physically see the other person? They see the room that they're in. It's just left up to your imagination to kind of figure out what this bridging is of their minds. And this one just cranks that up to 11 by having them physically interact with each other. The background seamlessly changing from one to another. I don't know entirely how they did it. Did they build a set that was half and half? I'm not sure, and I don't even really need to know. It's part of the movie magic for me. And yeah, the idea of physical elements spilling from one setting to the other is just so rad. It is so cool.
Yep.
I think this is an excellent pick for best scene. This comes back a few times. The final time they do that it's not long enough to be my favorite scene in the movie. It's about 30 seconds long, but we will get there. We will talk about it because it is rad as hell. But I think this is an excellent pick because it's a very cool idea that this movie does. I'm going to highlight a different scene. I think there's a lot of cool standout scene to this movie. This movie does have a lot of cool ideas. Visually, I think this is one of the more striking fights in the movie. It is Kylo Ren and Rey fighting on the sunken Death Star in the middle of this ocean with these giant waves. For a lot of this fight, first of all, it just looks great. This is a really good looking movie. And
yes, extremely.
I'm fascinated with the way that they obviously use a lot of sets and physical elements and puppets, which we love. But obviously, it's a movie made in 2018, 2019. They're using CGI. I know there's CGI backgrounds, but it's so seamlessly and so well done that I would probably be shocked to see how much of this is CG, but it just always has a tactile feel to it. I can always feel the setting that they're in, which is so important. And this is, I mentioned earlier I had an MCU comparison to make where I can't, and this is going to sound a little backhand at the MCU. Look, I like those movies and we talk about them all the time. But let's take Ant-Man and the Wasp's Quantumania, for example. It's a movie that feels like it was shot entirely in a warehouse. You know what I mean? Like everything in that movie is CG. And overall, I like that movie. Got a lot of positive to say about it. Maybe we'll talk about it on the podcast one day. But I can't help but feel the falseness, the CG-ness, the fact that the actors aren't in the same room or touching ground a lot of times in that movie. And I think this movie is just a great example on how to use a lot of special effects and CG, but still find ways to ground the action in a place that feels real. I know they're not really in the middle of the ocean on a wrecked ship, but it feels like they are. And the water is hitting them. Like, it's not raining in the scene, but the waves are so intense that the water is constantly draining down on them. And it's just this really intense lightsaber battle. I think it's probably one of the best in the entire series of Star Wars. I love that there's no music through most of it. You just hear the clashing of the lightsabers in the water, and it just feels so grounded in a way that's weird to say about this hyper stylized world that we have here. But I think it's just it's so well done. And I'm gonna get greedy with my favorite scene because it's gonna carry on through the end of this fight, which ends with something that I think we need to talk about, Andrew. Their conflict, their fighting comes to an end when Princess Leia dies. Now, we talked about this a little bit before we hit record, but we got to revisit this because you and I seem to have different readings of what's happening here. Because the way this read to me, I've seen this movie twice now in theaters, then again for this podcast. The way I'm seeing it is Princess Leia dying. Like she dies. Old age or whatever it is, she dies. They can both feel it because they're connected to the Force. And Kylo Ren losing his mother is a pain so intense that he loses focus and he can't fight. And Rey is able to get a fatal blow on him. And he almost doesn't even care that he's dying. He's so distraught. And this, for me, really tracks with the character because he was able to kill his dad in The Force Awakens. It wasn't easy by any means, but he's able to do it. The Last Jedi, he has an opportunity to kill his mom and does not. He does not have the strength to do it. He has a different connection with his mom. Maybe it's because they're both Force sensitive. Maybe it's because it's just men have a different connection with their mother. whatever it may be, he was not able to do that. He was able to disconnect from his father, but his connection to his mom is still like this little bit of goodness that is inside of him. And the pain of losing that is what causes him to finally question what the hell he's doing on this side. And that carries through with the scene with Han Solo, which we'll get to. But that was my reading of Princess Leia dying. Of course, also, Rey feels the death and the sadness. She kind of snaps out as well. She heals Kylo Ren, and she makes really one last plea to him. She said, I did want to take your hand, but I want Ben's hand, not Kylo Ren's. And she continues her journey. Andrew, before we get to Han Solo, how are you reading this scene, specifically Leia's death and how it affects these characters?
Well, it's largely the same, but I don't view it as Leia dying to reach Kylo. I think it's that Leia is reaching out to Kylo with basically the last of whatever power she has, which essentially kills her. The result being ultimately the same. The way that kind of God, what is that character's name?
Maz?
Maz kind of says what she's going to do is going to take everything she has. And, she's making it sound like it's a bit more than her just going to die, which is what I guess my only issue with that reading is she's kind of like, well, I got to go die in order for Kylo Ren to realize what he's doing is wrong. It feels like she's at least trying to call out to him. So that's kind of how I read it, is that she's like, all right, I'm going to call out to him one last time, try to get him to understand that this is not the path he has to be on. And that's going to take everything that I have left. It's kind of a last-ditch effort. And it works, I guess, to a degree. Ultimately, she reaches to him and passes. And it gives him the pause that allows Rey to kind of get the fatal blow on him. But then she also realizes what happens. And the timing of all of that is interesting because, I guess the timing is kind of like Ren is supposed to stop first. Then she passes, Rey hits him, stabs him, and then Rey also realizes what has happened. It's played, the timeline of all that comes together is pretty fast and loose, but the result is ultimately the same. He stops for a minute. That's all it takes for Rey to get the upper hand. And while he's and then regardless of whether it was her reaching out to him, he clearly knows that she's passed. And I do think you are onto something though, with the relationship with his mother was clearly different. And maybe it's because his mother was a Skywalker and she's more connected to Luke or whatever. But that whole Force side of him comes from the Skywalker, not so much the Solos. But like I said, the result is the same. I read it more as she's reaching out to him, and that it basically expends the last of the energy that she has to be alive, I guess.
Well,
but,
you're probably right, because I wouldn't even think about that line from Maz that she is doing something intentionally. I was looking at it as more incidental, but I guess I like the idea more that Leia is making a decision, having some agency, and reaching out and doing this thing. I think ultimately it works, but you can't help but feel like, man, there was probably something more impactful with Carrie Fisher playing a role speaking directly to Kylo. It's so unfortunate we don't get a scene of Carrie Fisher and Kylo on screen together. Could you have got to imagine this is where that would happen? But I do like the idea that she was doing something more intentional. But what we do get, continuing my favorite scene, we're still in the same setting. What we do get is Harrison Ford showing up on screen. I did not see this coming. Again, we spoke to this a little bit before we hit record. I think you also did not know Harrison Ford would be in this movie. They really kept this under wraps, which is very impressive this day and age. And this scene still hits. Regardless of, it should have been Leia. Yep. They had no choice but to pivot. And I think this was a smart way to do it. Harrison Ford, Han Solo, shows up and makes one last plea. I think there's some beautiful callbacks here. Kylo Ren again says, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it, which is what he said before he killed his father. But of course, now the new context is him dropping his evil pursuit and joining a force for good and what his mother believed in. Harrison Ford is... There's a lot of jokes about him showing up with stubble and messy hair, like he just rolled out of bed. But he's working. He's putting in a performance.
He is.
And him, putting his hand on Kylo is really effective, and I'm not gonna lie to you. This last little bit of this other callback they do is he calls him Dad for one, but he says Dad, and he can't get the words out. And Harrison Ford says, "I know," which is a beautiful moment between father and son. It's a fun callback to The Empire Strikes Back when Leia says, "I love you," and he says, "I know." You know that's what Kylo couldn't muster, but he accepts it anyway. And he throws his lightsaber into the ocean. Oh, it's so good. It is the, God, it's, hashtag positivity podcast. There's elements of this movie that certainly don't work for me, but this lands 100%. I think any version of this movie is going to have this moment, whether it's Leia or Harrison Ford, but this is, given the situation, about as good as they could have possibly done. Totally lands. So for that reason, this fight to this redemption of Ben Solo, I'm going to highlight as my favorite scene of the movie.
I think this is a fantastic pick. I did not know Harrison Ford was going to be in the movie. There was a lot of people who were guessing he might be, just because of the fact that Carrie Fisher had passed. And like you said, he brought the acting boots for this one. He definitely showed up, and Adam Driver too, for that matter. And they make this scene work. It is obviously the whole idea that people were like, well, how's Han Solo even in that scene? Shut up. Stop. Don't
I think it's the exact
wrong.
reason he said you're a memory. I mean, they
like, your memory. Yeah. And I like that. I think it works. Obviously, call it Harrison Ford being like, all right, I'll do one more time because we'll do this for Carrie. Whatever it is, I'm glad he did. It makes this scene hit really hard. I always do. I do watch the movie a little bit wrong right after this because he tosses the lightsaber away, and I'm like, "Hey, you're going to need that. Like, you're literally about to go into a situation where you're going to need that." But I can't use that one. It's red. That means I can't use a red lightsaber as the.
Can we talk about his lightsaber? It's the coolest in the entire series,
and they've never explained it. I love it.
Okay, yes, I love it without an explanation. Did you know there is an explanation for this?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure somebody did it somewhere, but it's not in any of the movies, right?
It's not. I have a younger brother who's pretty into like Star Wars lore, and so
Nerd.
Apparently, totally. What I don't know if this has ever been in a movie, but like what powers lightsabers is a crystal that's in the handle. Yep. I
don't know if that's been in a movie either, but I know that's the thing that makes it a lightsaber. Yeah.
So his crystal is cracked, which is why the beam is all wonky and crackling all the time. Mm-hmm. And what's it called on a sword when those two things come out the side? It's like a cross defense. The reason he has those two on the side is exhaust, because his crystal's putting out too much power. It needs to let off steam, essentially, and let off some extra exhaust. So that's why it has that cross coming out. So it's fun that there's an explanation. I don't need it. I think a saber looks rad as hell. It's like I said, my favorite in the series. I love the two little ones. I love when he uses those little ones to stab people. He does that a few times. Super rad. I love that evil saber.
It's very cool.
Yeah,
and
Ben
so
Solo
odd.
Can't use a red lightsaber. Andrew, come on.
He can't. He can't use it. Ben Solo builds lightsabers correctly. He can't have exhaust. But I do like that explanation. I think that's really cool. And I'm actually shocked it was never explained. It feels like a weird little thing that they would have purposely over-explained, or even just thrown in a hint about at some point, but they really never do. And I always kind of like that. Like, I don't need everything explained. Why is his lightsaber weird? Because his lightsaber's weird, man.
Yeah. It looks evil, right? It's like a satanic cross. I love it.
Not that
I love satanic crosses. I love that the bad guy has an evil looking lightsaber. Let me just.
I love it. Just turns it on. It's like, what's the deal with your lightsaber? Yeah, but it looks cool, right? But I do like his lightsaber a lot. But he chucks it away and then immediately runs into a fight. I was like, bruh.
It works out.
It does. But this is a great pick. Like you said, you're definitely cheating here. This is about 10 minutes of screen time, probably all said and done. But it's a great set of sequences. Like you said, though, this movie looks so good. Like all the settings, all the environments, they look very real. They feel real. Like I said, this is, again, it's not, we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's just super high waves, but it creates such a visual look, a unique visual look that stands out, and it's very cool. And I do like this one a lot. The whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, man, this looks cool. And I think that about through a lot of this movie. I'm just like, man, so much of this looks cool. And so I got to give Abrams a lot of credit there because they really did put in the work. Obviously, Abrams and the entire creative team here.
Yeah.
For really putting in the work there to make this look and feel unique at every turn. Obviously, we can't help but go back to a site of a previous thing. They do that here quite a bit, but it all works here for me. I think this is a really, really cool way to do it. And this whole sequence, it hits. It's like the final. There's other versions of this movie where I'm sure this was probably more of our finale in a different setting, where the Kylo Rey fight was kind of the culmination of the entire saga. But here we kind of make it this very pivotal scene, and it lands and it works. And this is, like I said, this is where we see Leia's sacrifice. We get kind of the last ride of Han Solo. And we get the redemption of Kylo Ren kind of leading into our big finale. And it all hits.
One thing we didn't cover here is, I wanted to really focus on what's happening on the sunken Death Star as my favorite scene. But we do cut away to see Princess Leia make her sacrifice. And we also see Finn, Poe, and Chewie arrive back at camp to go talk to Leia. And they get the news. Dude, all right. Leia passing away, like when she lays down, she dies, like it's emotional, and Carrie Fisher died and stuff, but like it doesn't hit me until it hits Chewie.
Ugh.
Dude, him dropping to his knees and screaming, I'm like, it's insane that this creature is like hitting me so emotionally with this, classic like Wookiee scream and stuff. And yeah, God, that hits so hard seeing his reaction to that. And on a less downer note here, I want to highlight this here. Kylo Ren, we see him masked through a lot of this movie, but we do see him unmasked after he gets stabbed in this scene here. And I want to throw one of my classic movie pitches to you, Andrew. We have Adam Driver and Paul Dano, and they're brothers. That's all I got. But I mean, are you in?
Yeah, sure.
They have this. They're weird looking individuals. I say that respectfully. Interesting looking individuals. They both play like this nerdy exterior, but a dark, sinister inside so well that I would love to see them paired up together.
All right. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Right.
Let's do that. I do want to shout out Jonas Suotamo, who plays Chewbacca in this movie. He has taken over for Peter Mayhew. I do not know if Peter Mayhew provided any kind of voice or anything for this, but if he is doing the voice as well.
I don't think Peter ever did the voice, right? Isn't Peter always just the physical performance?
I know he's the physical performance. I don't know who's doing Chewbacca's voice. Who is doing Chewbacca's voice? Voiced by Ben Burt. Okay, so wow. This dude's no slouch. He created the lightsaber hum, the sound of the blaster guns, the voice of R2-D2, the heavy breathing sound of Darth Vader, and the Ewoks language.
So he's like a sound designer that also provided a voice? That's cool.
Like, yeah, on the Wikipedia for Chewbacca, it says Ben Burt does the vocal effects. And so it looks like Mayhew does it off and on until Force Awakens, and then Sotamo takes over. But yeah, it doesn't, like on Ben Burt's page, it doesn't say he's the guy that did it. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, whoever's voicing Chewbacca in this movie, fantastic job. That scene alone hits really hard. Yeah, it works.
Shortly after this scene, we get our other legacy character with their small cameo. We have Luke coming back as a Force ghost. Rey is beginning to sort of lose her way. She tries to throw her lightsaber, and he walks out of the flaming wreckage and catches it, and has the line, "A Jedi weapon deserves more respect," showing a bit of his growth from the previous movie, where he tossed a lightsaber off a cliff, was totally disconnected from the Force and for the cause, and then comes around in the end. So now he is back to kind of recognizing that the Jedi can be a force for good, and they don't have to repeat the mistakes of the past. And he is giving this last bit of encouragement to Rey to keep going and not to give up. because that seems to be the path that Jedi Masters take. Because, again, sorry, I can't help it. Another thing I've heard complaints about The Last Jedi is why Luke is so cynical and disconnected from the Force, and it seems so unlike him. But it seems very much like a Jedi Master, because Obi-Wan Kenobi was living in a damn cave. Yoda was disconnected from the Force out in a swamp, living like a hermit. This is what happens whenever a Jedi Master feels like they have failed and let the Jedi down, is they take it pretty harshly, and it's not uncommon for them to disconnect from the Force. He's doing exactly what his previous mentors have done before he, much like them, learns that he does need to be still involved. And what he's doing here is preventing Rey from following the same path by giving her encouragement before she hangs it all up. It all tracks for me. It all works. I like the arc of Luke Skywalker across all of these films.
Yep.
I like the character development here. Interesting that his Force Ghost has long hair. Whenever he projected himself with short hair, I kind of wonder what this guy's self-identity really is.
Well, he projects himself with short hair because that was part of his ruse against Kylo Ren. He wanted Kylo Ren to remember him how he was.
Fair.
Not how he is. And then now the Force Ghost represents him as he is, not how he chooses to.
And how he is a bit hippie-ish.
Yeah, that's how he was when he passes on whatever planet that is. That's how he looks.
Fair enough.
I don't know how those rules work, because at the end of episode 6 now, you get
Hayden
old man Obi-Wan Kenobi, but young man Anakin Skywalker.
Have they not put
Ewan
McGregor into 6? Have they not done that yet?
No, and I guess because Alec Guinness is in all of those movies as a person, so like it's tough to do that. But Darth Vader's, the argument people will make is that when Obi-Wan passes, his appearance as Alec Guinness is how he sees himself. But when Darth Vader passes, his mental image of himself is how he was before he was Darth Vader. So he would look like the younger version of himself, because that in his head is how he still looks. And stretching maybe. Okay. But okay, fine. It's not the strangest explanation I've heard for explaining something in this universe. That's for sure. But yeah. Anyway, a classic scene. Andrew, what are you talking about? The classic Luke Skywalker back for people that may have been maybe not quite as jazzed about the Hermit version. But like I said, I think you see his growth from the last movie. In the last movie, he learns he was wrong. Failure is the lesson. And he realizes he can't keep hiding. So that scene with him and Kylo on the salt planet, great. Awesome. But here he gives that last bit of push, because this is right after the Death Star scene. She runs away. She's gonna exile herself somewhere to Luke. She's not even gonna take place in the final fight until she runs into Luke, who's just like, yeah, you know what I did was the wrong thing, right? You understand that. And this is where we also get our flashback, where we see that Leia was also undergoing Jedi training, but right before she finished, she had a vision of her son falling to the dark side, so she stops. But this conveniently gives us another lightsaber, so that she goes to Exegol with 2 lightsabers, not just one, and you gotta wonder if that's going to play an important factor here. But still, very cool stuff, and it all lands thanks to Mark Hamill coming back one last time, which would not in fact be the last time technically, but
all right, Andrew, we've got to talk about another character. When I walked out of the theaters, I had one thing on my mind. It was Babu Frick. This dude, look, I know you had maybe mentioned it off mic, and I had the same thought. Can we give Babu Frick the Mark Strong Award? The answer is no. It's not a performance that is. It doesn't quite hit those requirements to be a Mark Strong Award winner, and he's in it so little. But no joke, that was my favorite part of the movie after the first time I saw it. I was all in on this little puppet guy. I love the way he looks. I love his little voice and his weird way of speaking. I wanted so much more Babu Frick. I mean, I was giddy in theaters when he was explaining they have to erase his memory. And he's like, droid, remember, go blink, blink, blink. And that little blink, blink. I was just laughing so hard. My wife had to nudge me in the theaters. And then, my God, whenever he announces that he's done. He goes, "Yep, George is ready. Hey, hey!" This little hey, hey. It's the best. It makes me so happy. And there's no reason for him to show up at the end of the movie on Carrie Russell's ship, but he does. And you just have a shot of her cockpit, and then he pops his head up and goes, "Hey, hey!" And it's just, I'm so glad it's there. Babu Frick is the man. Gotta credit so many people. Like we gave JJ some credit for the look of this movie and using sets and using puppets. I mean, all of Disney and Star Wars did a great job really honing in on what feels like Star Wars, and you gotta have puppets. As good as CG is, it just doesn't quite have the same tactile feel as these movies, as we expect these movies to feel. So the fact that he's got an original character that is a puppet, and he's so small and cool and interesting. He has such a cool job. He's a droid blacksmith. I love everything about it. I don't know, Mike Strong Award we're going to give to Babu Frick because he is the man.
Agreed. The use of puppets is great. That's one of the things I love about Last Jedi is that Yoda is a puppet in that movie.
Right.
Which again, in keeping with how Yoda views himself,
he self-identifies. He sees himself as a
when
as a
Yoda
puppet.
passes in Return of the Jedi, he is a puppet, not his previous CG version. So he would appear as a puppet. And I love that Frank Oz came back to voice Yoda there too, because I don't know if you guys know this, Frank Oz is pretty cool. But here, I do want to give a big shout out to Shirley Henderson, who voices Babu Frick. You may know her as Moaning Myrtle from the Harry Potter films. You saw the recent murder mystery See How They Run. She cameos as Agatha Christie herself. Quite a range there, going from one of the most prolific murder mystery writers of all time after Babu Frick. So you got to step down there, unfortunately, but just make the best of it. And anyway, it's a fun character. I think the reason they show Babu Frick at the end is to tell you that Babu Frick is still alive because Kijimi, the planet they're on, gets destroyed by one of the Star Destroyers. So,
okay. Well, then, yeah.
So that was just for you.
Shows up.
That was just
it's
for
okay.
you. So that you knew Babu Frick was still alive. But yeah, this whole scene is pretty fun. 3PO gets a really heartfelt. He has a moment where he looks and they're like, "What?" He's like, "I'm getting one last look at all my friends." Before.
Dude, that hits. It's again,
and it hits,
amazing.
And then they undo it. They undo it by giving him his memory back. But that moment hits.
It's amazing. Like I was just saying about Chewie having the reaction hitting so hard. It's amazing that C-3PO, this stilted, odd robot, gets this. Who he himself doesn't really show much emotion, gets this emotional response. It's so cool.
It's pretty cool. And like I said, he gets his memory back because I guess it does keep in line that 3PO would, or that R2D2 would be the one to be like, yeah, of course I backed up your memory. Why wouldn't I have done that? Like of course I did that. But yeah, this scene is all good. Babu Frick is great. And yeah, some props here to Anthony Daniels because it is his voice performance that basically has to carry this. And fantastic work.
Yeah, I mentioned C-3PO gets some great moments. I love when they arrive at this planet that has the festival going on, and they're like, "Oh, well, aren't we lucky?" And he says it sarcastically. I think Poe was like, "Oh, lucky us, there's a big festival going on." And C-3PO chimes in and goes, "Lucky indeed. The festival is known for its colorful kites and delectable sweets." And like every character slowly turns around to look at him like he's an idiot, and he doesn't understand that.
And it only happens every 43 years.
Right. And he doesn't understand the looking at him, so he himself turns around to see what they must be looking at behind him. Such a great comedic beat. It's so good.
That's Pisana, the planet they're on there, is what it's called. But yeah, that and another.
You did what, Anna?
Shut up.
That was my callback to Mark Strong Award winner, Larry the Cable Guy.
Oh God. Oh no! Oh no! Forever enshrined in the hall, thanks to you. But I do like this scene a lot, though, because it's another chance where we get some cool visuals. We get something with a unique look, where we get the bright colors with the kind of the dust explosions. We get the kites. We get all that stuff. Just cool little visuals that again make us stands out. The visual sense can be very useful here, and they are using that extremely well. I like it a lot. And this is also the same planet where where Lando's return is revealed. And it is all very, very cool.
Yeah, I love anytime my notes. Anytime Lando is on screen, just say Lando like 6 O's because that's my reaction inside every time he shows up. It's so good. Andrew, the opening crawl famously starts with "The dead speak!" exclamation point, and it explains to us that a what's the word it uses? A broadcast somehow. Emperor Palpatine has sent a broadcast. Andrew, what exactly do you think that is? Like, did every radio in the universe start broadcasting his voice? Like, is it a podcast? Did Emperor Palpatine release a podcast?
Episode 1, The Dead Speak. What is this?
Hey everybody, it's your boy Emperor Palpatine. I am back. Be ready. I'm brewing up something. I'm coming at you. Be sure to smash that subscribe button. Hit the bell notification so you get the next episode when it drops. And just remember something dark side.
But before I talk any more about that, folks, let me tell you about this week's sponsor, Omaha Steaks. By using code DARKSIDE, you can get a full box that will not just include a turkey for this upcoming Thanksgiving, but will also include 6 free tomahawk ribeyes. Remember, folks, code DARKSIDE at checkout.
How did I build my army? With ZipRecruiter, and you can too.
Man, we're so funny.
Where is that Disney Plus show?
How do we not have our own show yet? How
do we not have sponsors? Look how good we are at these ad reads.
Omaha Steaks, I'm waiting. Code #PP. I do want to shout out some of our cameos real quick. So a lot of during this kind of finale sequence, I guess we can talk about that in the finale sequence. So I'll shout those out then. What I will shout out right now is some of our Stormtrooper cameos, which I think are very funny. Apparently, Ed Sheeran, Carl Urban, and Danny Harrison, George Harrison's child, all cameo as Stormtroopers in this movie. Keeping in line with some of the previous films, I believe Daniel Craig cameos as a Stormtrooper in Force Awakens. So a lot of these movies had a lot of fun just dropping in people as Stormtroopers and various rebel fighters and Empire people, and this movie is no exception. So plenty of fun Stormtrooper cameos, and it's always funny to me because it's not like you're gonna know if they got the full suit on. It's not like I could tell Carl Urban is a Stormtrooper. It's just for him, and that's cool.
They do that in all 3 movies, right? Because Daniel Craig is, I think, a Stormtrooper in The Last Jedi, if I remember correctly. What's his name? Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg is in The Force Awakens, completely unrecognizable as the merchant guy. So yeah, it is fun now. Obviously, there's tons of Star Wars fans amongst working actors, and they'll yeah, if you don't have a part for me, I'll show up one day, and you can just I just want to be able to say that I've appeared on screen. I think Jason Sudeikis is a Stormtrooper in The Mandalorian, so there's all kinds of these.
They're everywhere. Cameos. Yeah, it's always fun to see, and it's like you said, there's so many extras and everything. It's so easy to just slot someone into something and have it be no big deal. So it's cool.
Well, Andrew, you mentioned the finale. I think we can go ahead and talk about it. It's a big one here. We've got sort of 2 things happening. We have Rey and eventually Kylo taking on the Emperor on the ground. And up in the sky, we have the fleet of Star Destroyers taking on our small gang of rebels. And so we've got the air fight and the fight on the ground taking place simultaneously. And it's pretty. I mean, this is like a 20+ minute sequence. It goes on for a good while. What I do like, start off some positivity here. I like how Palpatine is. I mean, first of all, he's being so manipulative as he always is, but he's not just saying, "Hey, Rey, join the dark side, be evil with me." He's trying to force her to do it by saying, if you take on my mantle, you can control those star fleets and you can save your friends because you can have them stand down. So it's not even like, hey, be evil and kill everybody with me. It's like your only way out of this to save your friends is by joining me. And what you do after that, I'm just going to trust the dark force to take over from there. But it is such, I don't know. To me, it wouldn't be believable for him to say, hey, be evil, and her to be tempted by that at this point in her story. So I like that he comes up with this way to try to force her to do it by holding her friends in the balance up in the air.
I agree. I think this is a very cool way to approach it. Basically, yeah, it's your only option to stop what's happening. Not, I expect you to just be evil, but just, this is all you got. This is literally the only way this ends well for you and your friends. Little does he know. But yeah, so we've got those two different pieces, and the tides are not on our heroes' sides at the first bit of this. The air side assault, which is led by Poe, now General Poe, with Finn and all of the various other characters to this point, including that one guy that was a Hobbit who's in this movie. Kind of like Greg Grunberg, just has a few scenes where he shows up. And what is his name that I can't remember? Dominic Monaghan shows up as that other kind of recurring general. And he gets to survive, unlike Greg Grunberg, who does not. Rest in peace. But it is... and even a couple of other guys get to cameo in this scene, like Wedge Antilles gets to come back, kind of a classic Star Wars character from the original trilogy. Warwick Davis shows up as Wicket, who is an Ewok, who also gets in on the action. So they bring in a lot of cameos with this sequence too, not just Lando himself as well. But yeah, just a massive air battle, and it like just against these just easily hundreds of Star Destroyers. It's absolutely insane. Just the sheer scale of this army. And now the Star Destroyers themselves come with planet-killing weapons. We don't need space stations to blow up planets now. These Star Destroyers can do it all on their own. And that's kind of the implication they give a little bit about why the Emperor has not yet revealed himself until now, is that he's been building this entire armada this entire time and basically isn't going to reveal himself until it's ready. And now it's ready. And he's basically like, cool, Kylo can take it. And when he loses Kylo, he's like, Rey can take it. Really doesn't want to control it himself. I guess it's a lot of administration at that point. Your job role.
He's tired,
change.
Man. The cloning and living so long. I mean, he's ready to hand it over.
Yeah, I mean, and just you think about just when you get promoted into upper management like that, the job just changes. You're no longer the Emperor. You're no longer just killing people with lightning. Now you got weekly meetings, people asking you, hey, Star Destroyer maintenance is coming up and it's not in this year's budget. What are you going to do? And I just imagine
it's easy to lose the fun. It's easy to lose sight of what you got to the business in the first place to do.
Exactly. And at that point, once you're not having fun anymore, you're going to start slacking and issues are going to come up. And so I get it. I get why he wants to hand it off.
Let the next generation.
Not doing a great job of it, I gotta say, but I understand wanting to get out of the game. So dumb. But anyway, and this is where Kylo kind of makes his big re-entrance. And, no idea how he got here. No clue, but he gets here somehow. But
Ben finds a way, Andrew. Ben Solo. We got to call him Ben Solo now, Andrew. Kylo Ren is dead. Ben Solo is making his way to Rey, which, let me acknowledge real quick, the look of this character across 3 films. I like his helmet. I like his look in The Force Awakens. I like how it's Darth Vader-esque without looking like a clone of Darth Vader. I like that his look changes with every movie, because in The Last Jedi, he destroys his helmet. He's trying to establish a new identity, a new way of doing things. Beginning of this movie, his helmet is repaired for some reason. I'm sorry, I don't exactly get why, but I like that his look changes because I like the repaired look with the red lines like holding it together. I just think it's cool to kind of give him this evolving look. And the mask coming back is important, in my opinion, because now that he can take it back off and have that physical change to align with the way his character has changed. And more credit to Adam Driver, because he's so good as a villain, and then he is so charismatic as a good guy in these last few scenes. He hardly has any dialogue. He's doing most of it silently, but he is able to sell so much. And that brings me to my favorite 30 seconds of this film. Like I said earlier, it's not enough to really say my favorite scene, but he's fighting his way to Rey. He comes across the Knights of Ren. He is outpowered, outmanned. He does not have his lightsaber. He threw it to the ocean because it's red and he can't use it as Ben Solo. Rey is facing the Emperor, and she is being tempted to strike him down. And they have their moment where they connect, they bridge, they sort of give each other a approving look. And she reaches real high with a lightsaber, like she's going to strike the Emperor. She puts the lightsaber behind her back. And then Ben Solo reaches behind his back, and he pulls out the lightsaber. He gives this shrug, like, all right, we're going to do this. And he starts fighting the Knights of Ren with the lightsaber. Andrew, the passing of this lightsaber is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Not to be hyperbolic, but it is.
Yeah.
It is. I don't know. It's in the middle of. God, I'm trying not to make this backhanded, but I think this is sort of the epitome of what our show is about, because I have some issues with this movie. It may not work overall. It is what it is. But this moment deserves to be highlighted and praised because it is rad as hell. It's one of the coolest moments in all of Star Wars. It is everything from just the way they're able to do that, the way it's been set up across two movies, his little shrug at the end. He's given me, as a good guy, a lot of like Neo vibes from The Matrix, where he can say a lot with very little. Like his shrug is similar to Neo, like looking at a group of agents and being like, fellas, and then they start fighting. Like just this little moment of like, all right, let's do this. It works so well. Love everything about this little sequence. It's just so cool.
It is. I agree. I think obviously it's we've kind of split at this point. Kylo's fighting the Knights of Ren and losing, and so the lightsaber is needed to help him at this point. But yeah, it is a very cool transition that then leads to basically Kylo being able to. He went from losing to these guys to just single-handedly beating them, all of them, easily with a lightsaber. And then, obviously, he reunites with Rey at this point, and they team up to take on the Emperor together at this point to not great success. It's
not going well. He starts, like, sucking the life force out of him. They have a bond called the Dyad, which we haven't really talked about because, I don't know.
We don't need to.
We don't need to, but the Emperor is able to heal himself with the power of both of them. That's what's happening there. But as we are losing hope on the ground, up in the sky, some hope comes through because I love this moment for Poe because he has tried to do the right thing. He's tried to do what Leia would do. He is betting on reinforcements coming. He's like, if we fight for the right reasons and lead by example, other people across the galaxy are going to join in. The dark side wants us to think that we are few and far between, but we actually outnumber them. And that is his entire reasoning for his entire attack plan. He is depending on these ships showing up. And just as he's starting to lose hope, he says there's too many of them. We hear Lando Calrissian say, "But there are more of us, Poe," in his cool dialogue that I, of course, can't replicate. But he shows up in the Millennium Falcon with Chewie. Dude, what a cool visual. Lando driving the Falcon with Chewie at his side. Absolutely love that. And he's joined by a navy of civilians is what they call it, because the bad guys are like, where'd that navy come from? And he's like, they're just people. And so we have this like ragtag group of people showing up to help out. Very reminiscent of Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan movie, where a bunch of people show up at the end. That's the most obvious comparison for this scene.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I heard a lot of people after Rise of Skywalker came out saying that, this was the Dunkirk of Star Wars.
Yeah, it was good, but I saw this finale in a different movie. That movie was Dunkirk.
Yeah. I was going to be like, Dunkirk, more like, I can't think of anything.
Is it obvious that the joke here is Endgame is the more obvious comparison? Is it obvious that's what I was going for, Andrew? Because this is very reminiscent of Endgame, where the portals show up and a lot of good guys show up.
But
I don't see that as I joke. I don't see it as a detriment to this movie. It feels very organic for this to be happening.
Reinforcements showing up at the end of a movie is like deeply common. Like
yeah.
like the idea that like we're in danger and then the cavalry appears, like literally, like the whole joke is the cavalry's here because the reinforcements just showed up. It goes back to old westerns. It goes back to old war movies. Dunkirk's not the first war movie to have reinforcements show up. So, and the idea here is, again, it was interesting because I was watching Last Jedi again, and that sequence of Holdo I talked about with just the, we will ignite that spark throughout the galaxy. The end of Last Jedi just being the hope being restored to the galaxy. The kid swinging the broom like a lightsaber. Who is that kid? He's no one, guys. It doesn't matter. But that continuing through here, that there's a whole lot of people who are willing to help, and now they've kind of been rallied and brought together, and they have that idea that, maybe we can be the tide that swings the war. And it hits. And like I said, this is where guys like Wedge and Wicket start showing up, and we kind of get a few more legacy character reappearances as well, as they are able to turn the tide of the space battle. Meanwhile, down on the ground, we have kind of Rey and Kylo have both been incapacitated at this point, and then Kylo gets back up, and Emperor just shoves him down a hole. Just really like nothing.
Dispatches them pretty easily. Yeah.
Just as I fell, you too will fall, and then throws him down a hole. And I was like, what a jerk. Because I'm pretty sure that's what everybody calls the Emperor in this word. What a jerk. But
he's the big meanie, really.
Just God, so disrespectful. But but this leads to Rey kind of making her last stand, where she gets up, we're deflecting the Force lightning with her lightsaber, and Palpatine is kind of giving his last thing where he's like, all the Sith live in me. And then she has this big kind of rallying moment where she gets the other lightsaber, which gives you double power. And she's able to reflect all the lightning back. And she says, and all the Jedi live in me. And this is where basically anyone that's been a Jedi was used. Hayden Christensen, James Earl Jones,
Freddie Prinze Jr., Samuel Jackson,
Ian McGregor, Alec Guinness, Ashley Eckstein, who used to be Ahsoka on the television shows, like you said, Freddie Prinze Jr., Olivia Dabo, Frank Oz, Liam Neeson, Jennifer Hale, Samuel L. Jackson. So almost any notable Jedi of any kind has some kind of dialogue in this moment here. And that leads to her kind of reflecting Palpatine's Force lightning back at him, vaporizing him. Now, I don't know if you guys remember episode 3, but it was Mace Windu reflecting Palpatine's Force lightning back at him that like super aged him. And so you think this guy would have learned, hey, if they pull out a lightning and if I'm shooting them with lightning and they pull out a lightsaber, maybe just stop. Because
you're watching the movie wrong.
I know.
But anyway. I didn't make that connection though, to his lightning hurting him
twice.
Like it did in
Two nickels, Chris.
Yeah.
2 nickels. Come on. Anyway,
it had been established in Star Wars before. That's pretty cool.
Anyway,
that takes about everything out of Rey. She is able to strike him down, as well as I assume those are all like Emperor clones watching them, but you never get to look at their face,
like a weird like gladiator arena, but you're never made sure who these people are.
Yeah. Or again, to pull back to the Matrix, it's like all the Smiths watching Smith and Neo fight at the end. But they all get destroyed, and Rey is at the verge of death when Ben Solo comes back, and just as she force healed him, he uses the last of his life force to heal her. He makes the great sacrifice. He basically gives his life so that she can live. She is healed. He has died. It's almost a Romeo and Juliet style tragedy. They do kiss. Like, we just have to acknowledge that, and he does pass away.
Swelling score here.
Rolling score, credits. Well, not credits just yet. We do have this little epilogue of sorts where Rey takes on the name of Rey Skywalker with the approval of Luke and Leia appearing as Force ghosts, and it's a nice bow to put on the story.
It is the Rise of Skywalker. It ends... Well, it won't end the Skywalker saga necessarily, but it is a nice message about rejecting the path that you are told you should be on and embracing the one you want to be on. There's a message here about your family is the ones you put around you, not the ones that you are born into. And like you said, puts a nice little bow on the whole thing. But like I said, Ray will be back at least one more time, at least as of now. This movie, I guess, still could get canceled, like so many things Disney does these days. But I would be very interested in seeing this character return. I would be very interested in seeing what you could do with this character, kind of free from the, I won't say burden, but just like outside of the main
The
Star Wars
overarching story. Yeah.
It's the same idea. Was so hyped about Rian Johnson doing like a Star Wars trilogy that wasn't about Skywalkers, and Disney gives kind of back and forth answers on whether or not that's still happening. And if it never happens, don't get me wrong, I think it's a loss, but I don't expect it to happen now. But I'm interested in Star Wars kind of moving away from, kind of going somewhere else. And even the TV shows are kind of struggling with that, with like being like, here's the Mandalorian, who's a new cool character, but here's Boba Fett, and here's Ahsoka, and here's Grogu, and here's Luke Skywalker.
Yeah,
and
Luke,
so it's all become part of that greater thing. And so, and even guys like Thrawn coming in. So I'm like, I'm interested in a story that's, if Rey is the only character in that movie that I know beforehand, I would be ecstatic. I would be like, awesome. Whole new thing. Doesn't need to be anything else.
Over in our Discord, we'd have someone write in about the Rise of Skywalker. We have a channel dedicated to people sharing their positive thoughts about movies, so we can share it on the episode. This is from Mike Lynch, and it's not all positive, but I want to make sure I get as positive out there. Maybe I'll just, I'll censor some of the more negative stuff he says, and if you want to read it, hop into our Discord. Here's what they write. The Rise of Skywalker is the only Star Wars movie, #PP, that is bad, in my opinion. Not for lack of trying, the actors all seem to be giving it their all. To his credit, J.J. Abrams came into a very tight situation and did the best he could. The villain in this scenario is money and scheduling. I believe if they had put it off for 1 year, The Rise of Skywalker could have been a fantastic ending for new characters I really cared for, not a rushed apology for The Last Jedi. Here's hoping the new Rey movie will set things right, especially for John Boyega, but not Babu Frick. Babu Frick ruled. Well, hey, on that we can absolutely agree. Babu Frick is the man. There's some positivity in there, so I appreciate you sharing that. I gotta agree, scheduling, that definitely worked against them. I do wonder what would happen if they would have delayed the release of this movie, taken a little bit more time, and I wonder if maybe there was contracts in place really that prevented it. These things are weird for that reason.
Well, also, what would have been very interesting is that if you wait a year, that's COVID at that point. So,
oh, well, that's a very good point.
If you wait a year, December 2020 is the first COVID winter, and and that's a thing too that I think can't be necessarily ignored in this box office, is that COVID basically sets in 3 months after this. And I don't know if it had been released everywhere at that point. I don't know if the international market was the same or not, but like your box offices get cut off pretty hard about the middle of March. And
not to mention like lockdown happens in March, but it wasn't sudden. Like there was definitely a decline of attendance leading up to that, whether it was mandatory or not. So, very good point. Still made $1 billion though. I, in theory, I get how a delay could benefit, but in the real world with what happened, they needed to get this movie made. And I don't like acknowledging the vitriol and bad faith people out there too much, but I will say the idea, there was this like petition that they should just remake this movie and try again. I think that's nonsense. This is Star Wars Episode 9. You don't have to love it. And I think my overall opinion on it has probably been made pretty clear over the course of this 8 hours we've been recording. But there's plenty to like here. It's absolutely Star Wars. It feels like Star Wars. A lot is done right. And it's Star Wars Episode 9, whether you like it or not. I found plenty to like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the look of this movie is great. There's a lot of really fun stuff here, a lot of fun characters. But yeah, I always, the same thing happened after Last Jedi. There were groups that were like, Disney, we have the money to remake it. We're ready to have the conversation. And it's like, of course you are, because you're nobody. You're like, you think Disney should actually give you the time of day, or like, it's this idea, and this is kind of what I'm talking about when I say that, we've lost sight of not what I wanted does not mean bad. And the moment fans are like, we can remake this and make it better, that's the moment I'm like, easy, buddy. You don't know anything about anything. You want to make a $200 million blockbuster. No, that's not how that works. There's a lot to like here. I'm glad it will not be the end of the story. I think Daisy Ridley as Rey is a great character that can do a lot more. And so I hope that she does. And we'll see where that leads. But overall, like I said, plenty to like here. It is episode 9, whether you like it or not.
And that's Disney month. That's Star Wars almost feels like its own whole thing separate from Disney month.
Yeah.
So I got a feeling we'll come back around to some more Star Wars, but I think we covered a lot of ground this week. Man, that was a big one.
It was.
But now we are moving into December. And as you might expect, our theme is going to be holiday films. Because it's December, it's that time of year, the most wonderful time of year, some people would say. So we've got a varied lineup here. We've got some Christmas, we got a little bit of Hanukkah, we got a little bit of just winter time magic, if you will. Here's what you can expect from Best of the Rest in December. We're kicking it off with 8 Crazy Nights. That will be next week, the animated Adam Sandler film. Andrew, you've seen that one yet?
No.
I can't wait to hear your thoughts on this one.
Oh no. Oh no. Folks, that's never good.
The following week will be Ernest Saves Christmas, a bona fide Christmas classic, some would say. Definitely qualifies for our show. It's not exactly a critical darling. Does he fight any
trolls in that one?
Have you not seen Ernest Saves Christmas either?
I've seen it. I know I've seen it once upon a time, but they all bleed together at a certain point.
Fair enough. I don't think the trolls make an appearance. Next up, we will be covering Hook. This one might be sneaking up on you, the fact that it's Christmas. It's there, it's winter time, it's Christmas time. We get to talk about Robin Williams some more, and we will be joined by a very special guest for that episode. Can't wait for everyone to hear that one. And finishing out the month with Reindeer Games. Talk about
a holiday
Christmas classic. Is the legacy of that movie at this point role models, like Reindeer Games, a shorthand for a white person because of the joke on role models?
Is that specific? I thought they were just talking about Ben Affleck in that movie. I don't think they mentioned Reindeer Games, did they?
Andrew, if you're white, you're Ben Affleck.
That's true.
Yeah, he keeps calling them by
he keeps calling them reindeer.
He says, "Suck it, Reindeer Games."
That's right. Yeah. Probably.
That is the only movie we're covering that I have not seen. I've never seen Reindeer Games, Andrew. How about
I
you?
don't know that I've seen it all the way through.
I think like
some of these are going to be fun for me because I haven't revisited them in so long. I thought there were trolls in Ernest Saves Christmas, apparently. So
Andrew, they are all going to be fun for you. It's going to be a great month. Can't wait to get into it. If you want to leave some positive thoughts on these movies ahead of time, hop into our Discord. You can do just that. We'll read your positive thoughts on the episode as we go through our holiday month. And until then, until next week, until 8 Crazy Nights, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.